I exposed my sister and fiancé's deception at the altar. The wedding they planned to destroy became their undoing. I operate a hotel at one of Boston's most prominent establishments as a 45-year-old woman. I've worked my way up from the front desk to my current position, dedicating the last 20 years of my life to this business. What began as a work to help my sister when our parents passed away has evolved into my identity, my accomplishment, and my haven in a cruel world. Creating moments, planning experiences, and making sure every visitor feels the warmth and elegance that have come to define our brand are all part of managing this hotel, not just keeping an eye on things or upholding standards. 3 years ago, we received our 5th star after I oversaw the restorations, rebrandings, and even a total reworking of the service philosophy. The employees here are like family to me. Many have been with me for more than 10 years, and they have seen me grow from a young, anxious boss to someone they respect and trust. They have helped me through the difficulties of raising my 35-year-old sister Rachel, filling in when she needed me at school functions or during those trying adolescent years when she found it hard to handle our parents' absence. Although Rachel currently works at a nearby cafe, our relationship has always gone beyond sisterhood. I was 25 years old, just starting my management training program, and suddenly in charge of a 15-year-old who had lost everything when our parents perished in that horrible tragedy. I became her best friend, mother, and sister all at once. Her welfare was my top priority in every choice I made and every promotion I sought. Our haven was the hotel. Rachel would complete her homework in my office during school breaks while conversing with the housekeeping staff and picking up French from our seasoned concierge. As she became older, she would assist at the front desk at peak times, and our frequent visitors loved her for her inherent charm. Despite the difficulties of those years, we managed to put a life together out of the pieces of our broken family. I was never interested in romance. Dating felt like an extra hassle between running the hotel and making sure Rachel had everything she needed. There were fleeting flirtations at industry gatherings and sporadic dinners with business associates, but nothing that ever seemed worth pursuing. My employees would make jokes about putting me up, but I consistently refused. I would tell them that Rachel was my child and the hotel was my husband. When 43-year-old Ethan arrived at our hotel 3 months ago, everything changed. The way he viewed everything made him stand out right away, not only because of his custom-made suit or his quiet assurance. The majority of our affluent guests were too preoccupied with their phones or their own significance to pay much attention to their surroundings. Ethan watched. He praised the delicate lighting that took me months to perfect, remarked on the vintage molding we kept throughout restorations, and pointed out the fresh flowers in the foyer. During check-in, he said, "Your attention to detail is extraordinary," his eyes looking directly into my eyes. "Even though I've stayed in hotels all over the world, this one is unique. You can sense the thought that goes into each detail." Those remarks struck a chord with me because they recognized the hotel's thoughtfulness and effort in addition to its beauty. When he inquired about nearby eateries, I found myself offering not only the customary suggestions but also my own personal picks. The undiscovered treasures I came upon on late-night strolls following especially trying days. We fell into what seemed to be a natural pattern throughout his 3-night visit. After his meetings, he would come back to the lobby lounge every evening, where he was in an ideal position to strike up a discussion with me whenever I walked by. He inquired intelligently about my professional background, the hotel's past, and my future goals. Ethan appeared truly interested in every detail. In contrast to most visitors who view such discussions as merely being polite. Instead of doing the customary corporate checkout on his last morning, he left a handwritten message that read, "Your enthusiasm for the place is inspiring. How about we carry on our conversation over dinner?" He gave me his personal phone and said he understood if I wanted to keep connections professional. There's so much more I'd love to learn. I debated whether or not to text him for hours. When Rachel came into my office that afternoon, she saw that I was preoccupied and demanded to see the message. "You have to call him." More excited than I had seen her in years, she exclaimed. "When was the last time someone actually took the time to get to know you, not just your job?" Everything changed after that first dinner. Similar to my enthusiasm for hospitality, Ethan talked passionately about his work in investment banking. Just as I saw the delicate dance of managing a premium hotel, he explained complicated financial tactics in a way that made them sound like art. He listened to my mention of my parents with sincere compassion, offering his own stories of resiliency and loss. Months passed, and our bond grew faster than I should have been concerned, but Ethan made it all seem normal, even inevitable. Always keeping in mind the preferences of my employees, he would surprise me with lunch at work. He demonstrated an amazing recall of every small detail I had shared about Rachel on our weekend excursions, even swinging by to provide encouragement and inquire about her job at the cafe. He informed me, "You're different," one evening as we were strolling around the waterfront. "By now, Most people in your situation would be burned out and jaded from dedicating so much of themselves to their families and jobs. However, you've managed to strike a lovely mix between professionalism and sincere friendliness. Finding someone who genuinely appreciates the importance of creating experiences for others is uncommon. 2 months into our relationship, over a private dinner at a fancy restaurant with a view of the harbor, the proposal was made. The ring was exactly what I would have picked for myself, elegant without being garish. As he knelt next to our table, Ethan talked about creating a future together while a string quartet played sweetly in the background. When you find someone who shares your beliefs and commitment to greatness, why wait? I know this seems fast, he acknowledged. Allow me to be a part of your universe and assist you in building something even more remarkable than what you have already accomplished. When Rachel learned that she was engaged, her reaction was intense. Tears were running down her cheeks as she gave me a hard hug. At last, she said. Someone deserving of you. I was genuinely moved by her excitement as she immersed herself into the wedding planning. We stayed up late talking about specifics and exchanging aspirations and wishes for the future, as if we were teenagers once more. The wedding preparations moved swiftly forward. I deserved to be the focus of attention for once in my life, so Ethan insisted on throwing a lavish celebration. He was comforting when I raised concerns about the expenses. His suggestion was to combine our resources. I saved for our honeymoon and future house, you saved for the wedding. I take it that we are now partners. Rachel insisted on handling a lot of the wedding planning so I could concentrate on managing the business. She managed the guest list, set up samples, and communicated with vendors with a level of efficiency that made me think of myself. You've taken care of everyone else for so long, she replied. Let me handle this for you. The hushed phone conversations that ended abruptly when I walked in the door, the occasional glance between Ethan and Rachel during our family dinners, and the unexpected coincidences of them running into each other when I was preoccupied with work-related emergencies are some of the indications that I chose to ignore. Everything fell apart yesterday. When Ethan hurried off to what he claimed was an urgent client meeting, he left his phone behind and came to my office to discuss final wedding plans. The notifications lit up the screen as the cell phone continued to vibrate with incoming texts. I didn't intend to pry, but I noticed a preview of a message. My darling, I can't wait until tomorrow. She won't be aware of what struck her. Rachel was the sender. I opened the phone with shaking hands. There was no password security. He never thought I would see it, I discovered later. My world was completely upended by what I discovered. They exchanged hundreds of mails dating back months before I had even met Ethan. In an early communication, Ethan had written, "She's perfect for our plan. Hotel manager, substantial savings, no real relationship experience, plus she trusts you completely." Rachel had even more heartbreaking answers. "She has always put a lot of effort into looking after me. She never established a personal life. This will be far too simple." Everything had been planned by them. It wasn't by accident that Ethan showed up to the motel. Rachel had told him everything about me. Even my favorite wines and my routine. Every chance meeting, every sincere discussion, had been meticulously orchestrated. But their affair was only one aspect of the truth. Ethan's career as an investment banker was unsuccessful. He used credit cards to purchase his luxury suits. His promises of an opulent future were false, and his tales of financial triumph were made up. I was his lifeline as he drowned in debt. Their true strategy was made clear by the messages: utilize my cash to have an extravagant wedding, then during the ceremony, shockingly disclose their affair. They would make fun of me in front of my friends, co-workers, and employees, and I would be left to bear the consequences. With what was left of my money, they would vanish. Something else caught my attention as I read through their exchanges. Notes from Ethan's legal wife, Catherine. She knew who he truly was, unlike me. Arguments concerning unpaid bills, unpaid child support, and his gambling debts filled their texts. Now as the light is rising, my workplace is covered with deep shadows. My hair and makeup crew will be here in a few hours. Rachel is meant to be present, acting as the maid of honor and a loyal sister. Another detail I discovered in their communications is that Ethan will likely be practicing his vows, which I now know were lifted from romantic films, in preparation for his role in this deception. The location, catering and flowers for this wedding cost all of my life savings, which I have been saving for the past 20 years while raising Rachel, sending her to college, and helping her pursue her dream of owning her own cafe. However, a peculiar serenity has descended upon me as I sit here and watch the early morning light dance across the hotel lobby to which I have devoted my life. They believed they were taking advantage of me by betraying my love and confidence. They failed to remember that I wasn't naive to get to where I am now. I've managed one of Boston's most prominent hotels for 20 years, and over that time I've learned how to deal with crises, transform setbacks into opportunities, and, above all, play the long game. I have been on the phone for the past several hours, to my lawyer, who has been diligently documenting everything and preparing the required legal measures. To Catherine, who needs to know what her husband is plotting, and to the hotel security team, who have always been more than just employees to me. They are the family I selected, and they have already taken some action. Today, a very different kind of ceremony will take place in the exquisite ballroom, where I have planned many flawless weddings for other ladies. I will benefit from every detail they intend to use against me. Everything will go exactly as planned, just not in the way they had hoped. This includes the 300 visitors, the costly decor, and the meticulously scheduled timing. I get a little depressed when I see the bridal gown hanging in my workplace because of the dreams it symbolized. However, such fantasies were based on false information. And I've always valued harsh realities over lovely lies. In front of everyone I know and admire, Rachel and Ethan intended to make a scene that would stick in my memory. Their goal was to make my wedding day a grand event. I've worked my entire career planning flawless events, and this one won't be any different. Things won't go as planned for Ethan and Rachel tomorrow. They're going to have exactly what they wanted, a wedding to remember. After all, I've learned one important lesson in my 20 years of hotel management: although the client isn't always right, they always receive what they are entitled to. The city is now painted in tones of gold as the sun has fully risen. Time to get ready for the once-in-a-lifetime performance. They believed they were the show's directors, but they are going to find out who actually controls this establishment. In contrast to them, I never let my audience down. Update. This morning, Catherine showed up at my hotel office. She produced a stack of financial paperwork, including evidence of Ethan's debts, unpaid child support, and the loans he had taken out using their shared assets as security. She was a composed woman in her early 40s with a calm intensity that mirrored mine. She put the documents on my desk and added, "He's been doing this for years." Spread elaborate stories about his wealth, targeting successful women. But this is the first time he's worked with an accomplice. I mentioned Rachel's involvement, and her voice caught a little. The following hour was devoted to going over messages and contrasting timings. The holes in my discovery were filled by Catherine's record. Ethan had a recurring pattern of extravagant credit card purchases, seducing women, and then vanishing with their money. Rachel's involvement, which gave his scam more legitimacy, was the only thing that was different this time. After that, my lawyer showed up and went over everything we had collected. "This isn't just fraud," she clarified. She has already prepared emergency petitions to freeze accounts and stop any attempts to transfer funds, saying, "It's a conspiracy. And with the evidence of their planned public humiliation, we can add emotional distress to the charges." Both of them continued to send messages throughout the morning. Rachel texted to say that she was happy to pick up the flowers. Fake concern filled Ethan's voice as he called twice to discuss last-minute plans. Every interaction seemed like a new betrayal when I didn't respond, but I remained silent. A discreet briefing has been given to the hotel staff. The purpose of the security cameras is to record everything. Disguised as service personnel, police officers have been placed subtly throughout the hotel. They are awaiting my cue, prepared to take action as soon as the fraud evidence is made public. Catherine went into further detail about their marriage, including how Ethan would go missing for months at a time and then come back with long-winded justifications and vows to reform. For years, she has been accumulating evidence in anticipation of the ideal time to take action. It was like giving her the last puzzle piece she had been attempting to complete when I contacted her last night. The cosmetics artist set up in my own suite an hour ago. In an apparent attempt to coordinate with Ethan for their big performance, Rachel texted that she would be late. A lovely reminder of how quickly fantasies may be turned into a weapon is the bridal gown hanging, ready. When Ethan's parents first arrived, they had no idea what their son really was. The reporters I reached out to pretend to be wedding photographers, eager to capture every moment. Ethan will not be aware of Catherine's presence until the ideal time, as she will be seated in the front row. The required paperwork has been prepared by her lawyer for prompt action. The frequency of Rachel's messages is increasing, and there is a tinge of anxiety in them. "Are you all right?" she inquires. "You seem distant." If it weren't so terrible, the irony of her worry would be funny. This is the result of 20 years of sisterhood. Though not for the purpose they intended, the location is turning into the ideal stage. Instead, every detail they planned to embarrass me would double as the background for their publicity. When I look at my reflection in the office window, I see someone who has spent decades controlling chaos rather than a victim. They believed they were planning the ideal scam, but they would soon discover who is actually in charge of this operation. Update 1. Just now, The makeup artist completed her job. This isn't the bridal preparation I had envisioned, and every brushstroke serves as a reminder. My mirror displays expertly done makeup and flawless contouring. They expect me to be a blushing bride, and I look just that. When Rachel did show up, she rushed into the bridal room with an armful of flowers and that phony smile that I can now see clearly. She embraced me with what seemed like real warmth and said, "You look stunning." How long has she been this skilled at acting? As I observed her in the glass, she started to fiddle with my veil and talk about last-minute things. As her eyes met mine in the mirror, she remarked, "It's unbelievable that my big sister is finally getting married. You deserve this happiness for everything you've done for me." If it weren't so tragic, her performance's bravado would be stunning. All morning, Ethan has been sending texts that are meticulously crafted to keep up his facade until the very end, such as, "Can't wait to see you, love," and "just a few more hours until forever begins." According to his most recent communication, his parents are excited to have me join their family. The hotel's huge ballroom has been renovated just as planned, with 300 chairs precisely placed, crystal chandeliers glittering, and white roses all over the place. Only a few members of my team are aware of what is actually going to happen, but they work quickly through the preparations. Ethan won't notice Catherine until it's too late because she is already positioned, sitting quietly in a corner. A few minutes earlier, her lawyer showed up with paperwork. The police officers who are pretending to be employees have verified their identities. Rachel never stops attempting to spend meaningful time with me. "Do you recall the time we spent planning your wedding as children?" As she adjusted my clothing, she inquired. She is correct in one regard: this will undoubtedly be more remembered than those childhood fantasies. This is even better than anything we imagined. I can see visitors coming in through the window of the suite, acquaintances I've known for decades, co-workers from the hotel business, and even some of my frequent visitors who have grown to be like family. They're all decked out in their best attire, anticipating a love celebration. Rather, they will witness a very other event. In the foyer, Ethan's parents are welcoming visitors, and his father is gushing over his son's prosperous investing business. Their world will soon fall apart just as thoroughly as mine did yesterday. The string quartet is getting ready and rehearsing in the wedding march, which will never come to its customary end. I just received confirmation from my lawyer that everything is set up. Legally, as soon as Ethan and Rachel take action, a series of unanticipated events will begin. Rachel continues to be the loyal sister by assisting me with my sneakers. She squeezed my hand and asked, "Are you nervous?" I forced a tiny grin, realizing how accurate she was about the gravity of what was about to happen. It's normal to be quiet before such a big moment. We have 30 minutes till the ceremony starts, according to the wedding coordinator's recent signal. Rachel excused herself to inquire about a few things, most likely to finalize plans with Ethan. Today, I'm by myself in the bridal suite, surrounded by the mementos of what ought to have been the most joyous day of my life. They'll discover in half an hour how justified their dread of my attention to detail was. Update 3. I started walking down the aisle as the wedding march got underway. Ethan played his role as the successful, attractive groom filled with emotion as he stood at the altar. The scenario briefly resembled the fairy tale conclusion they had intended to ruin. Rachel, still wearing her maid of honor outfit, came forward as I was halfway to the altar. She said, "I'm sorry, but I can't let this continue." Her voice echoing over the flawless acoustics of the ballroom. "Ethan and I are in love. I'm carrying his child." The audience's gasp was precisely what they had hoped for. Just as expected, Ethan's face changed from that of a stunned groom to that of a regretful lover. I recognized that they had practiced this moment. Their spectacular surprise had been meticulously arranged. Ethan said, walking over to me, "Grace, you've been nice to us, but Rachel and I—" My voice was clear and calm when I interrupted. I motioned toward the rear of the room, and the big screens that had been used for wedding pictures came to life. "Let me handle the announcements from here." The meticulous preparation, the premeditated deception, the jokes about my confidence, and their planned betrayal were all visible in magnified form. Catherine got up from her chair and walked slowly in the direction of the altar. Ethan's expression turned pale. She said, "Hello, darling." Her voice piercing the startled quiet. "Surprised to see your wife here?" There was another round of gasps when the word wife reverberated around the ballroom. The policemen who had been pretending to be employees took their places. With paperwork in hand, my attorney came forward. Financial information started to slide on the screens: the theft, the fraud, the complex strategy they had devised. "Ethan Thompson," declared the lead detective, "you are being held on charges of grand theft, fraud, and conspiracy. Miss Rachel Anderson, please remain where you are." Rachel's expression fell flat. The self-assured smile gave way to fear. She reached for me and pleaded, "Grace, please. You don't understand. He said that once we had your money, we'd be together." Finally expressing my rage, I said, "Once you had my money? You'd run away together, start a new life with the savings I earned while raising you." When Ethan attempted to flee, the hotel security guards were prepared. All the exits were closed. His father got up and demanded answers. He received copies of the evidence, his son's dishonest past and the list of deceived women, instead of replies. Ethan's assets were frozen and divorce papers were served to him by Catherine's lawyer. As the cops carried Ethan away in handcuffs, the visitors watched in stunned silence. Rachel stayed motionless, tears running down her cheeks. She muttered, "What's going to happen to me?" I said icily, "That depends on the district attorney." She was escorted out of the ballroom by 2 officers. The click of handcuffs marked the end of 20 years of sisterhood. My hotel personnel navigated the turmoil with efficiency, guiding guests to the reception area. Surrounded by the flowers and decorations intended for a completely other event, I found myself feeling oddly at ease as I stood in the empty ballroom afterwards. Even while the betrayal still hurt, it was somewhat satisfying to see their well-thought-out strategy fall apart. Catherine's case appeared strong, and Rachel was assisting the prosecution. There would be several courtrooms where justice will be served. A month has passed since the wedding that never happened, because both Ethan and Rachel decided to collaborate with prosecutors after realizing the strength of the evidence against them. The court case proceeded more quickly than anticipated. I was given $50,000 in damages from Ethan by the court, but getting it will be a completely different story. The judge's remarks regarding their plan's premeditation and the breach of family trust were especially severe. Ethan is currently facing criminal charges in 2 additional states, and Catherine's plea for retroactive child support was also successful. Throughout the proceedings, Rachel made multiple attempts to get in touch with me. "I know I can never make this right," she said in one message, "but please, you're the only family I have." I erased all of her messages without answering. The sister I thought I knew, the one I reared, never existed. According to my lawyer, Rachel may be able to avoid jail time by cooperating with the prosecution, but she will probably still be subject to probation and required reparation payments. She used to talk about wanting me to be an aunt someday, so the fact that she is still carrying Ethan's child feels like a cruel joke. Once more, although in a different way, the hotel has turned into my haven. I was really struck by the loyalty of my workers during the entire event. They have surrounded me with a protective circle, answering phones, rerouting intruders, and making sure I can concentrate on what I do best, managing this establishment. Quickly, word got out about the failed wedding and the arrests that followed in the hotel business. Unexpectedly, it has improved rather than harmed my reputation. "Takes real strength to handle that kind of betrayal with such dignity," said one of my frequent clients. In a long letter, Ethan's parents expressed their sadness and embarrassment. I turned down their offer to pay for the wedding. Money was never the point of this. It has to do with family and trust. I've already transformed the intended improvements for the honeymoon room into a brand new corporate conference space. I've kept in touch with Catherine, exchanging details on Ethan's current legal issues and offering support for one another's court challenges. She has turned into a surprising ally who genuinely recognizes the extent of his dishonesty. "We're both better off knowing the truth," she stated to me, "no matter how much it hurts. I still have the bridal gown hanging in my wardrobe. Something prevents me from making the final decision to donate it, even though I should probably. Perhaps it serves as a reminder of what I learned about my own strength rather than what I lost. The woman who purchased that outfit was incredibly naive in her trust. Now the owner, a woman, is aware of this. I've kept Rachel's old room ready for her over the years, and her belongings are still there. I finally packed everything into boxes yesterday and gave a storage firm a call. It will be held for 30 days. I forwarded the information to her via my attorney. Anything left over after that will be donated. The betrayal itself is no longer the most difficult aspect. It's recognizing how poisoned 20 years of recollections have become. Was Rachel constantly playing a part, waiting for the appropriate moment, or was every Christmas picture, milestone celebrated and late-night chat with her genuine? I've returned to my job, finding solace in the well-known routines of hotel management. I'm putting all of my energy into new initiatives and enhancements, and my staff has observed that I'm more focused than ever. I was invited to give a presentation on crisis management at a hotel management conference last week. I hardly recognized Rachel's handwriting when I looked at her signature on the settlement documents this morning. On the other hand, I hardly recognized her anymore. With a few pen strokes, 20 years of sisterhood came to an end. I have lost my anger. Simply fed up with bearing the consequences of what transpired. My true family. My employees and devoted customers need me, and the hotel needs me. And I simply have to look after myself for the first time in 20 years. I occasionally find myself thinking about Rachel and the unborn kid she is carrying late at night in my office. I know I made the correct decision though, when I think back on the messages I saw, the premeditated betrayal, and the years of deceit. After burning, certain bridges ought to remain ashes. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you. I had to play this ruthless game to save my sister from our terrible family after being mistreated and kicked out at 17. Since every choice I make now will affect not just my life but also my sister's future, I, a 25F, feel compelled to relate my tale. This time has been planned for years, and now that it has arrived, I need advice to ensure that I don't make a mistake. Living in Pine Grove as a child was like being in a separate reality than what you see on television. It's the sort of area where children learn to count by counting the empty bottles of their parents and ambulance sirens are your nightly lullaby. When my parents gave birth to me, they were hardly teenagers. Both parents had no business parenting a child, and mom was 16 and dad was 18. We lived in a dilapidated 2-room apartment in the Riverside complex, which ought to have been demolished decades ago. Because the walls were so thin, you could hear everything, including drug sales, domestic arguments, and the cries of infants at 3 in the morning. Due to unpaid expenses, we frequently lost heat over the winter. Early on, I discovered that it was best to sleep in layers, starting with my school clothes, followed by my weekend attire, and finally, any outerwear I could locate at the nearby donation center. Although the journey to school was an experience in and of itself, school was my haven. In order to tidy up any mess from the previous evening, I would get up at 5 in the morning. Sometimes it was vomit from mom's awful night, and other times it was broken glass from dad's most recent outburst. When permission sheets needed to be signed and both parents were unconscious, I had to learn how to precisely forge their signatures, which I did by the time I was 7 years old. My elementary school teachers made subtle attempts to assist. Every day, Mrs. Martinez would inadvertently pack an extra lunch. When my shirt got too soiled, the janitor, Mr. Wilson, would leave his closet open so I could get a fresh one. Miss Brady always managed to have socks in my size in her lost and found cabinet. In retrospect, I saw that they were all attempting to establish a safety net without drawing notice from my parents or the police. Not all of the other children were nice. They would ridicule my outfits from charity stores or the fact that I would stuff my pockets full of cafeteria food for supper. To be honest though, it was easier to deal with their cruelty than their sympathy. I could at least defend myself with contempt. Sympathy only made me feel powerless. When I reached 15, everything changed. I was able to secure employment at our neighborhood grocery store, Wilson's Market. I met Mrs. Thompson, the store manager there, and she would end up being my lifeline to another world. A middle-aged woman with salt and pepper hair and cardigans adorned with cat pins, she didn't look particularly noteworthy. I couldn't see it in myself, but she saw something in me. It was difficult during those initial weeks at Wilson's. I was attempting to conceal the injuries from Dad's bad days while juggling work, school, and my personal life. Mrs. Thompson began assigning me to extra shifts whenever she saw the bruises, but she never inquired about them directly. While we worked together, she would teach me about bookkeeping, customer service, and inventory management. More significantly though, she would share with me tales of her time in college, her trips, and a world outside of Pine Grove. She taught me how to build credit, balance a checkbook and make future plans, things no one else had bothered to explain. "Ashley," she would add, "you have more potential in your little finger than most people have. Never listen to someone who tells you otherwise." I created my first bank account with her help. Neither of my parents had ever had a step, so it was a big step. I meticulously recorded my earnings and spending in a notebook that I concealed beneath a loose floorboard in my room, making sure to preserve every dime I could. Even though it felt like an unattainable ambition at the time, Mrs. Thompson assisted me with starting a tiny college fund. Then the news that would alter everything arrived. Mom was expecting a child once more. Mom wandered into our small kitchen as I was standing there attempting to rescue enough edible portions from a stale loaf of bread to prepare dinner. She was crying this time, but she was high as usual. She said, "I'm pregnant," as if she were making a weather-related remark. "Your father's going to be pissed." My stomach sank with my heart. Asterisk. Not another child in this hell asterisk was all that was on my mind. That evening, I printed out information packets that I knew my parents would never read and used the library computer to explore adoption agencies. Dad warned me to keep my mouth shut and threw a beer bottle at the wall when I attempted to bring up the subject of adoption. It was a difficult pregnancy. I tried desperately to stop Mom from using, but she persisted. I would conceal her narcotics, only to uncover fresh caches. After pouring out the alcohol, I would return home to find fresh bottles. I made an anonymous call to social services, but it was unsuccessful. Pregnant addicts were not unusual in our community. Lily battled withdrawal symptoms for the first 2 weeks after birth in the NICU. Every day after work and school, I went to see her, sitting next to her incubator and observing her small body trembling. At that point, I vowed to do whatever it needed to have at least one person on this baby's side. I began working 2 jobs, the Sunrise Diner on the weekends and Wilson's after school on weekdays. I put every dime into my secret account that wasn't used for really necessary expenses. I learned how to stretch my money and make emergency plans from Mrs. Thompson, who also assisted me with budgeting. We both understood it was just her way of helping me buy things for Lily, but she even made a special employee discount for baby stuff. My resolve to get us both out grew along with Lily. I would get up at 4 in the morning to study before school, work until it was time to go, and then come home to look after Lily. 3 hours of sleep and cold coffee became my go-to fuel. In fact, my grades went up. Desperation and resentment are strong motivators. However, secrets cannot be kept in a tiny community, particularly from addicts who are constantly seeking their next hit. My parents became aware that I consistently had money for Lily's necessities, such as clothes, formula, and diapers. They started requesting an increasing amount of my wages. Dad would slur, "Family helps family," obstructing my way to my room. "We need that money for bills." However, I had witnessed far too many of my earlier contributions become small plastic bags and empty bottles. I began lying about my pay, claiming that my hours had been reduced and that business was slow. When Mom arrived at Wilson's during my shift and yelled about unappreciative kids and family devotion, the facade fell apart. Mom was too far gone for Mrs. Thompson's attempts to defuse the situation. She said Mrs. Thompson was taking advantage of me, knocked over displays, and threatened to call the labor board. They phoned the cops. It was embarrassing. Everything came apart that night. When I got home, Dad was waiting for me, itching for a fight and more inebriated than normal. "Your mother says you've been lying about money," he snarled as he swayed in the corridor. "We have bills to pay with that money. I'll repay you if you give it to me." I declined. I stood my ground for the first time in my life. "That money is for Lily," I responded, attempting to maintain a level voice. "I've witnessed the fate of the funds I give you. I'm finished." Chaos ensued. Dad began hurling my belongings onto the front lawn while yelling about unappreciative kids and familial responsibilities. Lily was crying and reaching for me as Mom stood in the doorway. The neighbors hurriedly averted their gazes after peeking through their blinds. It was better to overlook family drama in our area. I was 17 years old when I stood with 2 garbage bags of stuff in our front yard, which was littered with rubbish, and I saw my baby sister cry for me through the window. My dreams are continually plagued by that sight. Fortunately, I was taken in by my friend Jessica's family. Despite their own lack of wealth, they made room in their modest 3-bedroom home on the opposite side of town. Mrs. Rivera, Jessica's mother, assisted me in submitting financial assistance and scholarship applications. Her father used their old station wagon to teach me how to drive. They merely required that I maintain good grades and assist with domestic duties. They never asked for rent. I learned what a true family looked like from living with the Riveras. During their family dinners, there was genuine conversation rather than argumentation. Rather than fighting when intoxicated, they used baked cakes to celebrate birthdays. Yes, they had issues, but rather than burying them in drugs and bottles, they dealt with them together. However, Lily remained enmeshed in upheaval while I was at last finding stability. On occasion, I would spot her at the playground or on her way to school. She was developing too quickly. Her clothing, which were either church donations or hand-me-downs from neighbors, were usually too big or too little. Whenever I could, I would give her money and teach her to conceal it in her stuffed animal so our parents wouldn't notice. Our covert emissary was Mrs. Thompson. When Lily visited the business, she would offer her free treats and update me on her health. Mrs. Thompson would tell me, "She's got your spirit." When we checked in once a week. "She shares your intelligence. She is surviving." It wasn't enough to survive. I wanted Lily to be successful. With newfound vigor, I pushed myself into my studies. My SAT results gave me access to opportunities I never would have imagined. I sobbed for hours after receiving the acceptance letter from State University along with a full scholarship offer. I couldn't just drive back on the weekends because it was 6 hours away, which was probably for the best. The distance would allow me to concentrate on my objective, which was to create a secure existence so that I could finally save Lily. It was a culture shock at college. Being from a wealthy suburb, My roommate didn't understand why I had 3 jobs and a full school load. While I was scrounging money to send home to Lily via Mrs. Thompson, my classmates grumbled about their parents not purchasing them new cars. I minored in business administration while majoring in finance. I felt like I was getting closer to my objective with each class. I gained knowledge about estate planning, taxes, and investing. I began to learn how money actually worked, not just how to get it, but also how to use it to my advantage. I was able to secure an internship at a prominent investing firm during my junior year. For their entry-level jobs, the starting pay was higher than my parents' combined highest earnings during their prime. I put in more effort than everybody else. I arrived early and stayed late. I immediately accepted their offer of a full-time job following graduation. My existence now, 8 years after I was kicked out of my childhood home, would have looked unthinkable to my adolescent self. My home is in a nice neighborhood. I have a good savings account and a steady work with perks. I never have to check my financial balance before making a grocery purchase, and I drive a dependable car. But without Lily, none of it mattered. Now that she is 11, Mrs. Thompson informs me that things have only gotten worse at home. Mom switched from medications to more difficult substances. Due to DUIs, Dad has been in and out of jail. In only the last year, they had been evicted 3 times. No one has bothered to report them, which is the only reason they haven't lost custody. That will soon change. I've been recording everything for years, including every instance of intoxication, missing school days, and instances where they used their rent money to buy narcotics. Mrs. Thompson has documented instances of neglect that she has seen. Jessica's mother has kept track of the occasions when Lily has arrived at their home underdressed or famished. I've spoken with family law specialists. I'm ready, even though I know the process will be messy. Now that I have the means, I can battle for custody and provide Lily with the security she needs. However, I want to approach this intelligently. I therefore require guidance. I intend to show them my accomplishment by inviting them to my home. My parents are people I know. They react exclusively to manipulation and money. They will want a portion of what I have once they see it. I'm relying on their avarice. I can already envision how it will transpire. Like they attempted to embezzle my teenage earnings, they will attempt to move in and take advantage of my success. However, I will be establishing the conditions this time. When they won't go, I'll give them a choice: either help with Lily's voluntary custody transfer, or I'll throw all I've got at CPS and the courts. I want to know if anyone has done something similar effectively. It may sound calculating, but I've studied the most skilled manipulators. To save my sister, I must play their game, but I want to do it well. This is the culmination of my entire existence. This was the reason for every extra shift, late-night study session, every dollar saved. I will never let Lily down again. I'll provide updates as events unfold. Update 1, I appreciate all of your help and guidance. Even though I took action today, I'm still analyzing what transpired. My former neighborhood was my first stop. It seemed unreal to traverse those well-known cracked sidewalks. It was like viewing a film of my former existence. Children were still using deflated basketballs to play on the street. Mothers were still shouting from paint-peeled windows. It was the same ice cream truck that was traveling about with its broken music. At Wilson's Market, training a teenage girl who looked so much like me at her age, Mrs. Thompson was right where I expected her to be. Even though she has arthritis and is in her 60s, she still wears those cat pins and stands erect. Everything I had practiced crumbled when our gazes locked across the store. "Look who finally learned to use a comb," she replied, using an old joke to diffuse the situation. She kept an extra hairbrush in her office for my more hectic mornings when I was 15. We ended up having a conversation during her lunch break in her office. That old coffee machine, which sounds like a dying automobile engine, is still with her. She told me everything I hadn't heard. Since she turned 11, Lily has worked at Joe's Diner. Off the books, of course. Mrs. Thompson handed her a hollow book, in which she keeps all of her money. It seems that my survival skills, including my previous coping mechanisms for our parents' difficult times, were passed down to my sister. She's smart about it, according to Mrs. Thompson. Smarter than you were, even. Lily has an entire network of locations she can turn to when things become tough at home, and she conceals a prepaid phone in her school locker. The children of the neighbors believe she is simply hosting frequent sleepovers. Mrs. Thompson then produced a hefty envelope made of manila. She stated, "I've been keeping records. Times, dates, and incidents. Each time your parents arrived intoxicated. Each time Lily showed up with strange bruises or hunger. Each time they made an attempt to steal or create a scene. This is what the other store owners have been doing. In the same way that they attempted to protect me, the entire community has been covertly defending my sister. At the convenience shop, Mr. Chin allows her to complete her homework in his back room. Instead of discarding damaged books, Mira Rodriguez from the library saves them for her. Old Joe from the diner even tells the health inspector that she is his niece while slipping her additional food. The most difficult aspect was going to my parents' place. With peeling paint, missing shingles, and a yard full of enigmatic stains, the building appeared to have aged decades in a matter of years. By the steps, a broken tricycle that I had never seen before was rusting. It was like a thunderclap when it knocked. With her hair unkempt and a cigarette hanging down, Mom opened the door. When she first saw the suit, the pearls, and the leather bag, she didn't recognize me. In a matter of seconds, her gaze changed from skeptical to perplexed to astonished. "Get out here, Frank," she muttered. "Holly." At 2 p.m., Dad staggered to the door with a drink in his hand. He had lost more teeth and put on weight. His eyes immediately went to my watch, my backpack, and my car parked in front of the street as the recognition dawned on him more slowly. Like a weird stranger, which I was in many respects, they invited me in. I didn't see any cats, but the house smelled like cat poop. A road of empty bottles led to the couch. Mom began to pick things up frantically, as though it would make up for years of neglect. The start of their conversation was the true shock. They pretended that the past had never occurred, that they had never expelled me, and that they had always encouraged my success. While starting another cigarette, Mom remarked, "We always knew you had it in you. Your father's side is the source of your business acumen." I gave them space to speak while I watched them create an alternate world in which they were happy, encouraging parents. Dad kept bringing up bills, giving away that he was having money problems. Mom continued talking about how families should stay together and how lonely I must be in the big city. Everything else vanished when Lily got home. With her rucksack clasped like a shield, she stood in the doorway and gazed at me as though she were seeing a ghost. Despite growing taller, she is still too skinny and is dressed in clothing that was worn out 3 years ago. "I promised," was my only response. She ran to me, dropping her backpack. As our parents awkwardly stared, presumably trying to figure out how to make the most of this reunion, we held each other. I left shortly after that. I set the hook before I went, but I made up an excuse about a work call. I announced my large 5-bedroom suburban home, invited everyone to come over this weekend, and saw money signs light up their eyes. I gave Lily a burner phone and gave her instructions to keep it hidden in a whisper. I didn't have enough money to go on a major binge, but I did have enough to make sure our parents would be there on Saturday. I looked at Lily in my rear-view mirror as I drove off. Holding the concealed phone like a lifeline, she stood on the porch. "Little sister, only a couple more days. We have a few days left before this game is officially over. On Saturday, the second stage begins. The documents have already been prepared by my attorney. If necessary, Mrs. Thompson and half the community are prepared to testify. Let us first examine the extent to which our parents' avarice will lead them along this garden path that I have constructed. If you would like to hear what comes next, please let me know. This weekend is when the real show begins." Update 2, the family visit became something I never would have imagined. A clear demonstration of why I must remove Lily from the house immediately. At 10 a.m., I picked them up in my SUV. Mom had really tried, sporting a dress that I'm fairly certain she stole from Target, with the price tag still partially visible beneath her arm. Dad was dressed in the same rumpled shirt and tie he usually wears to DUI hearings. Lily was dressed in her cleanest possession, her school uniform. It was a weird drive. Dad continued saying that I was just as good with money as he was, while Mom kept remarking on every posh building we passed. Sitting quietly in the back, Lily absorbed everything. Several times, I caught her gaze in the rear-view mirror. She knew exactly what was going on. Mom actually let out a gasp as we arrived at my place. Although it is by no means a mansion, it might as well be in comparison to our former neighborhood. Dad immediately glanced at my neighbors' boats and their drives and began figuring out just how much he could borrow. Once we were inside, the real performance began. Mom started organizing her belongings right away. She remarked, "This living room is just perfect for my collection," alluding to the box of broken figurines she had owned since I was a child. Dad was measuring the garage in his mind and discussing how he could turn it into a workshop. I gave them the entire tour and played along. Their eyes became larger and their clues more potent with every room. Mom began discussing the sense of emptiness in the house and the desire for a familial touch. Dad was often talking about his handyman abilities and how he could actually keep up a property like this. Lunchtime was the tipping point. I had placed an order for simple catering, consisting of salads and sandwiches. I had a fancy assortment of wine, and Mom had 3 glasses. That's when she dropped the bomb, she insisted. She stumbled. You know, we've been considering moving. Even though this neighborhood seems pleasant, you have so many empty rooms. Dad jumped right in. We may assist with the expenses. Up here, I could make things better. You would no longer need to be by yourself. I was grinning on the inside, but I kept my look neutral. They were doing exactly what I had instructed. I told them I would give it some thought and get back to them the following week. They were almost pitiful in their excitement. When I was able to get Lily alone and showed her my home office while our parents were preoccupied picturing their future life in my living room, it was the most illuminating moment. As soon as the door shut, she started crying. She said, "They sold my bed last week, claimed to be in need of cash for bills, but they simply didn't have to complete. We were both aware of the money's whereabouts." She told me everything, including how she has been taking showers at school after her early morning job in the cafeteria, how they have been renting out a portion of the house to some pals who traffic drugs, and how she hasn't had hot water in months since the bills weren't paid. Downstairs, Mom was growing more inebriated and talking louder. She was definitely searching for more alcohol because I could hear her digging through my kitchen cabinets. While talking on the phone, Dad boasted about his daughter's accomplishments, her large home, and potential investment chances. When I saw Mom attempting to fit my silver candlesticks into her pocketbook, it was the last straw. She said she was merely staring at them when I challenged her. In an attempt to mediate the situation, Dad suggested that I give them a loan, only for the time being. That night, as I drove them home, I overheard Dad's aspirations to make the neighborhood better and Mom's inebriated intentions to redecorate my house. When I dropped them off, Lily gripped my hand and I gave her another burner phone because her previous one had magically vanished after our parents discovered it. I gave my lawyer a call that evening. The documents are prepared. They will discover exactly what sort of family reunion I have been organizing when they eventually call about moving in next week. Along with statements from Mrs. Thompson and the neighbors regarding their continued mistreatment of Lily, I have added all of the information from today to my file, including the attempted theft, the intoxicated behavior and the disclosures of their present living circumstances. The trap is in place. They believe they are going to move in with me and take advantage of my prosperity. Rather, they will have to decide whether to relinquish custody of Lily or deal with the full weight of CPS and the criminal justice system. Even though I feel bad sometimes for being so calculated, I know I'm doing morally wrong when I see Lily's expression when she told me her bed had been sold. The encounter I've been preparing for years will be the final update. Update 3. Although the emotional toll was greater than I anticipated, the story's conclusion went just as planned. This is how it all transpired. As I had predicted, Mom called on Wednesday. Her talking to authority figure's voice was an attempt to sound sober. As he does when he's anxious, Dad was on speakerphone, clearing his throat every few seconds. They, not me, wanted to talk about the possibility of a living arrangement. For a serious family conversation about their future, I invited them over. The bait was immediately taken. Over the phone, I could almost hear them giving each other high fives. On Thursday, they arrived with 2 suitcases an hour early. It would have been funny if it weren't so depressing. They were unaware that a CPS caseworker and my attorney were waiting in my home office. The manila files on my dining room table should have been the first clue that something wasn't right. As Dad began his rehearsed speech on family togetherness and supporting one another, Mom gave them an anxious look. I allowed them to speak for precisely 7 minutes, during which they made empty veiled attempts to gain entry into my house and made vows to clean up, obtain jobs, and be better parents. I opened the first folder after that. "Let's discuss the drug deals that took place in your living room last month," I remarked, referring to witness accounts and police files. "Or perhaps the 3 months of utilities that were not paid. Or should we talk about Lily's unexplained disappearance of school supplies?" It was almost funny how quickly their faces altered. Mom's phony smile broke. Dad's self-assured stance faltered. The proof of neglect, neighbor statements, school reports, strange injury records, Mrs. Thompson's comprehensive logs of their public intoxication, and testimonials from half the community regarding their continued drug use were all laid out by me. I pushed another folder forward and stated, "This is what's going to happen. These documents pertain to a custody transfer. All of this remains between us if you sign them, refuse, and the DA's office and CPS receive everything in these folders." Mom used her typical strategies, sobbing, begging, and saying they could change. Dad tried to make me feel bad about being loyal to the family. They turned to threats when that failed. Dad hissed, "You can't prove anything. Nobody will believe you." At that point I used my trump card. Using my laptop, I saw video records from the previous few months, including images from the security cameras of my neighbor's drug sales, fights while intoxicated, and neglect of Lily. Quietly, I murmured, "The DA will believe this. So will the judge." The ensuing hush was deafening. 3 hours were spent negotiating, threatening, crying, and ultimately resigning. The documents were signed by them. They were immediately notarized by my lawyer. I said, "Get out," after it was finished. "If you ever try to contact Lily without her consent, everything in these folders goes public." They didn't even ask to bid her farewell before leaving. They were attempting to bargain one last helping hand when they spoke about money. I refused to comply with their requests. That night, Lily moved in. Everything she owned had been stolen or sold, leaving her with just one backpack. She sobbed as she stood in her new room, which was her first actual bedroom since she was a toddler. Whispering, "Is it really over?" "Yes," I said, "it's really over." We went shopping for her first actual bed the following day. Everything was hers to choose, including the comforter, pillows, and bedding. No more sharing a mattress on the floor with mom's friends or sleeping on a shabby couch. Mrs. Thompson joined us in celebrating this past weekend. She brought Lily's hollow book, which she had been using for years to conceal her money. We totaled her money, which came to $847.23. I assisted her in opening her first bank account and matched it dollar for dollar. Lily and I went to register for her new school yesterday. When the principal looked over her files, he was immediately astounded. Like her sister, Mrs. Thompson would say, in spite of everything, our parents haven't made an effort to get in touch. Several times, their friends have contacted, most likely in search of their next score. All of their numbers were blocked. This time, the house feels better, fuller. Lily was watching TV in her room last night when I heard her laughing. Genuine laughter, not the apprehensive type we were taught to diffuse stressful circumstances. She asked if she could have a friend over this morning. I was moved to tears by such a simple plea. It's her first time hosting a friend, never invited them to a safe house. I want to express my gratitude to everyone who helped me get through this. When I doubted myself, your advice kept me strong. To anyone in a similar circumstance, keep track of everything, make your case, exercise patience, and above all, never give up. Lily is currently sleeping in her new room, bed, and actual house. She no longer has to worry about what she will wake up to for the first time in her life. We made it. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you. My brother ruined my life by fabricating evidence of my affairs, but after 6 years, the truth finally came out. My high school love, Rachel, was 45 years old and I, a 45-year-old guy, was her spouse. Together, we have 4 daughters. Ashley, 18, Olivia, 21, Madison, 22, and Lauren, 24. We fell in love when we were both 14 years old during our freshman year. I can still clearly recall our English class when I first met her. I assisted her in picking up the books she had dropped. It was our reality, but it seemed like something from an adolescent film. From the first time they laid eyes on Rachel, my parents, Robert, 68, and Pamela, 66, fell in love. She was their unborn daughter. Mom would teach her our family dishes and invite her over for Sunday dinners even when they were first dating. Dad gave us relationship advice all the time and treated her like his own daughter. He would say things like, "Think before making big decisions and communication is key." Our relationship was shaped by those statements for many years. This parting is made much more agonizing by the unique memories that each of my girls has. Our oldest, Lauren, was my shadow when she was younger. In the park close to our house, I spent numerous weekends teaching her how to ride a bike. Like the older children, she was determined to learn without the use of training wheels. Her delighted smile brightened the entire neighborhood when she eventually succeeded. As she had envisioned, she is now a prosperous lawyer. When Madison, our artistic soul, was 15, she converted our garage into her art studio. I constructed an easel and arranged her materials to assist her in setting it up. That area became her haven after we transformed it over the course of a summer. Our living room is adorned with a family portrait that she painted. It was her first significant composition. If it's still there, I wonder. The best part of my weekends was watching Olivia play soccer. Until I had to miss them all, I never missed a single one. When my mother contacted me at work to tell me that I had made the varsity team as a freshman, I could still hear her happy voice. She learned how to play for me, and we practiced penalty kicks in the backyard for hours. At games, she constantly claimed that I was her fortunate charm. My tiny coding partner was Ashley, my tech-savvy youngest child. When she was 10 years old, We worked together to build her first computer. We would work on basic games late into the night since she was so eager to learn programming. She came up with the concept for an app that would use puzzles to teach children math. When everything collapsed, we were halfway through the development process. Our first few years of marriage were both magical and difficult. During our senior year, we were both pleased and afraid to learn that Rachel was expecting Lauren. I chose to work at a nearby manufacturing company while attending night classes rather than enrolling in college right away. While raising Lauren, Rachel worked part-time to complete her degree. Despite barely making ends meet and living in a small one-bedroom apartment, we were content. We learned collaboration and resilience over those years. But my 43-year-old younger brother James was always a specter over our joy. I was too trusting to notice the signs properly, but they were there from the start. James would make excuses to be around us even in high school. He would offer to drop Rachel off at our favorite cafe on date nights or offer to drive her home while I had basketball practice. I now understand that James had a pattern of compulsive behavior. He followed his middle school teacher to the grocery store and sent her letters since he was obsessed with her before Rachel. It was dismissed by our parents as a harmless crush. He developed an obsession with a girl in his high school class, making up intricate tales about their connection when they had hardly spoken. It was written off as a teenage drama once more. When Rachel and I got engaged, it was the first big warning sign. James became furious rather than merely disapproving. When he arrived at Rachel's place of employment, he created a commotion that nearly cost her her job. He was yelling that I had taken her away from him and that they were destined to be together. Rachel was afraid. She told me everything right away, and that's when I started thinking about severing my relationship with James. However, my parents stepped in. They persuaded us that James needed assistance rather than rejection. We attended family therapy sessions for months. James expressed regret, claimed to have changed and seemed to accept our relationship. Although I now question whether it was all part of his long-term plan, he even gave a heartfelt speech during our wedding. James became more and more involved in our life over time. He positioned himself as our children's favorite uncle, helped me land a job at his company, and started showing up at family get-togethers all the time. He was especially close to Madison and Lauren, frequently bringing them out and purchasing them pricey presents. I assumed he was simply making amends for his previous actions by being a good uncle. In hindsight, I can see how he methodically gained the trust of each member of my family. He supported Rachel's professional networking, helped my parents with their money, and was always ready to provide a helping hand. In contrast to my hectic schedule and frequent business travels, he positioned himself as the dependable, stable sibling. I needed the business travels to advance in my job, but James took advantage of me. Some of the things he would say to Rachel were, "Mike's always away, but I'm here if you need anything." While I was away, he offered to assist with school functions and home repairs. I was appreciative of his assistance at the moment. I can now understand that it was all a part of his deception. Everything broke apart 6 years ago. I had been at our company's West Coast office for a week on business. It was a presentation for a big project that might get you promoted. I missed Rachel and the girls so much that I contacted her every night to tell her everything that had happened during the day. I also participated in video conferences with the girls, listening to Madison's most recent art project ideas and providing remote assistance with Ashley's math assignments. My whole family was in our living room when I got home. James was there, appearing serious, while Rachel and the girls were crying. Tension was pervasive in the air. Rachel exclaimed, "How could you do this to us?" with a look of fury in her eyes that I will never forget. James had meticulously planned his attack. He pulled out a folder that seemed to be unquestionable proof of my adultery. Intimate text exchanges, hotel receipts, and even pictures of me entering a hotel with another woman were all there. He asserted that the woman was a coworker who, feeling guilty, had told him everything. The images were modified with skill. Later, I found out that they were staged to appear suspicious and were taken at official business meetings. Although the texts were entirely false, they contained information about my travel and work schedule that could only have been known by someone with insider knowledge. James had made things appear genuine by using his position at our organization. I made a valiant effort to protect myself, but long before I entered that room, James had turned everyone against me. He had been subtly hinting at my odd behavior to Rachel for weeks. My daughters had been persuaded by him that I was behaving differently. He had even expressed his concern about my decisions to my parents. I'm still troubled by the nightmare of the next several hours. Lauren, who had always been my strongest supporter, yelled that she would never forgive me and hurled her house key at me. Even though Madison was crying so much that she was having trouble speaking, her words, "I hate you," were audible. My daughter Olivia, who used to race to me after every soccer match, was unable to even look at me. Why did Daddy do this to us? Ashley, who was only 12 at the time, turned to Rachel and questioned. The most agonizing response was probably from my parents. Dad, who had taught me everything I needed to know to be a decent spouse and father, and who had always been proud of me, looked at me with utter disgust. His statement, "No son of mine would do this to his family," is still ringing in my mind. You would end this divorce quickly and amicably if you still had any dignity. That evening, I was expelled with only a bag of clothing. In the weeks that followed, I made frantic efforts to establish my innocence. I spent almost all of my savings on hiring 3 different private investigators. After weeks of searching for the supposed other woman, the first private investigator found that she had moved to a different state. Despite identifying several discrepancies, the second investigator was unable to demonstrate that the hotel invoices were fakes. In fact, the third PI nearly discovered James's manipulation before abruptly and mysteriously abandoning the case. James had threatened his family. I found out later. The divorce process was harsh and swift. Rachel was furious and distraught and didn't want to interact with me. My daughters blocked my social media accounts and phone number. I only made contact through attorneys. I lost everything in 6 months, including my work, most of my friends, my home, and my family. At the office, James had been deliberately spreading accusations that I had a history of having inappropriate connections with coworkers. The stigma followed me, and clients began asking not to work with me, even though nothing was formal. I started again after moving to a little apartment across town. The isolation was debilitating. Sometimes all I wanted was a glimpse of my girls, so I would sit in my car outside my former home. Every milestone I missed was like a stab to my heart. I couldn't get close, so I watched Lauren's law school graduation from the parking lot. I sent Madison an anonymous purchase of her favorite piece from her first art show. I cheered alone in my flat while watching Olivia's college soccer championships on the internet. I learned about Ashley's successes in the science fair from the local newspaper. However, nothing could have prepared me for Lauren's wedding's agony. Through a social media post from a common acquaintance, I became aware of it. I lost my role in my moment when I saw James escorting my daughter down the aisle in the pictures. I was in a dark place all day thinking about things I'm not proud of. At that point, I picked up my cat, Max, from the neighborhood shelter. To be honest, he saved my life more than once, and he needed someone just as much as I did. My only means of escape became work. I shifted departments, switched companies, and threw myself fully into my job. I received 2 promotions, but without my family to celebrate with, accomplishment felt meaningless. My background was unknown to the new employer, yet I was never able to build strong bonds with my coworkers. How do you justify not talking about your family, eating lunch by yourself, or going to office parties? Over the years, I made a few unsuccessful attempts at dating. I was never sure how to respond to the first question, which was always about family. How can you explain to someone that your children despise you, that your brother methodically ruined your life, and that your whole family thinks you're a cheater? Most first dates ended without a second date. Every holiday served as a reminder of my losses. Thanksgiving meant consuming just microwave meals. Christmas was spent drinking too much and viewing old home videos. My girls and my own birthdays were the worst. Because I couldn't stand to see the unopened presents in my apartment, I continued to buy them presents each year and kept them in a storage unit. Then everything changed 3 days ago. An unidentified number called me. My mother was crying. Although she refused to provide anything over the phone, she said that they had learned the truth about James's deceit. She pleaded with me to meet with them, stating that everyone wanted to make amends and was remorseful. Feeling numb, I hung up. 6 years of loneliness, suffering, and memories lost. My daughters spent 6 years growing up without their father. James lived the life he had stolen from me for 6 years. That cannot be resolved by a simple apology. I've made touch with a legal practice that focuses on defamation and family law disputes. The attorney thinks we may have a good case, particularly if my family now has proof of James's dishonesty. Reconciliation is not something I'm interested in. Justice is what I desire. I want James to be held legally responsible for ruining my life. Some may believe that my family should forgive me because I'm being too harsh. James didn't simply betray my confidence, though. My whole life was methodically ruined by him. He poisoned my girls against me, took away my fatherly position, and robbed me of years I will never get back. How can you forgive someone who denied you the opportunity to watch your kids grow up? Who caused you to miss the wedding of your daughter? Who deliberately and methodically turned your whole family against you? I'm meeting with the attorneys tomorrow to go over our alternatives. My mom asked for a meeting, but I haven't replied yet. Although I have mixed feelings about it, I would like to know how they found the truth. The harm has been done. I'll provide an update as soon as I learn more. I have to prioritize the legal issues and preserve my own emotional well-being throughout this time. Update 1. My parents just presented me with startling proof at my meeting with my legal team. These are the events of the past 2 days. It was eye-opening to meet with my lawyers. They clarified that based on the information my parents gave, James might be charged with several crimes. My mother gave me a big folder with the original, unaltered pictures, which make it obvious how James altered them. Along with bank statements demonstrating payments for fabricating hotel receipts, they also found email exchanges between James and a professional photo editing firm. During a drunken confrontation with Rachel last week, the truth was revealed in a surprising way. By declaring he didn't design all of this simply to lose her, James unintentionally made a mistake. Rachel began investigating after reading this message and discovered a hidden email account on their shared computer. Everything was in the emails. Correspondence with several individuals he hired to assist him. Complete records of his 6-year plan to ruin my life, and even early drafts of the fictitious texts he wrote. Significant progress has been made in the police investigation. James's co-conspirators, including the friend who assisted in making fictitious hotel reservations and the photo editor, have previously been interviewed. By testifying against James, these people are now assisting the authorities in the hopes of avoiding being charged themselves. James's scrupulous record-keeping is especially unsettling. On his laptop, Rachel found a password-protected journal, which she gave to my lawyers. He started planning even before my marriage to Rachel, according to the journal. He spent a lot of time writing about waiting for the right time to carry out his plan. After learning that James intimidated other co-workers and utilized resources to falsify proof in order to support his lies, my former company opened an internal inquiry. Compensation for wrongful firing is being seriously discussed, and the HR department is getting ready to issue a formal apology. The evidence is growing. Experts in forensics discovered erased documents that demonstrated he had attempted similar schemes twice previously but had not carried them out correctly. The degree of forethought is astounding. Rachel is completely assisting investigators and has filed for divorce from James. The worst thing has been discovering how he took advantage of my daughters. His journal entries describe how he poisoned them against me in a methodical manner. He would deliberately sow doubts, misrepresent my statements, and fabricate circumstances to cast me in a negative light. One of Ashley's pals was even paid by him to say they had seen me with another woman. More evidence was found during today's police search on James's office. They discovered USB disks with backup copies of his falsified evidence, several burner phones, and more counterfeit documents he hadn't yet utilized. In order to keep up his network of falsehoods, they also found a list of the persons he was blackmailing. Considering the severity and length of his offenses, my attorneys are certain that they will seek the harshest punishments possible. According to them, James might be sentenced to up to 15 years in prison and could be awarded millions of dollars in civil damages. They have recommended me to forego all communication with my family for the time being, stating that everything must go through the appropriate legal procedures. Another victim has been identified during the investigation. James planned a similar plot against his college roommate and the roommate's girlfriend 20 years earlier. This former victim got in touch with my attorneys to tell his experience after learning about my case. I'm continuing to concentrate on the court case rather than any possible family reconciliation. We're filing the civil complaint tomorrow, and the grand jury hearing is next week. Now, it's important to make sure James bears the full repercussions of his conduct. When there are noteworthy developments in the court case, I'll provide an update. Update 2, the legal process is moving more quickly than anticipated. I need to share a few significant changes that have happened since my last report. James was taken into custody at his place of employment yesterday morning. He was overheard making calls about erasing evidence, which an employee immediately reported to the police and the company's security. He attempted to remove files from his work computer as he was being arrested, but everything had already been secured by the IT department. His response to being caught was telling. He remarked, "She was supposed to be mine anyway," without refuting anything. Today, the grand jury indictment was delivered. They returned their decision in less than 2 hours since the evidence was so strong. In her 20 years of experience, the prosecutor described it as one of the most blatant instances of planned hatred she has ever witnessed. James's actual character eventually came to light during police questioning. He sobbed uncontrollably and disclosed more information about his obsession. He had apparently been surreptitiously filming Rachel for years, gathering thousands of hours of video from covert cameras in their home. This is being handled by the police as a distinct criminal surveillance case. An even more alarming discovery came from the company's internal investigation. James had been embezzling money to finance his plan. He created fictitious vendor accounts and had been embezzling money for years to cover the costs of the different individuals he employed to assist in fabricating the evidence against me. Separate charges are now being pressed by the firm. There have been conflicting responses from my daughter to these disclosures. Lauren has been going over all the evidence because she is a lawyer. We spoke directly for the first time in 6 years when she called me today. At first, she was unable to talk through her emotions. When she was able to speak, she described how James had played on everyone's anxieties and vulnerabilities in a unique way. James had offered to help sell some of her artwork, but Madison found that it was actually stashed away in a storage facility he rented. To keep her financially reliant on him, he had been taking her work and lying to her about it. She is pursuing separate theft accusations. Olivia discovered tapes of James paying her college soccer coach to bench her during crucial matches that I might have attended. He wanted to make sure that I couldn't use sports to get back in touch with her. The NCAA is currently investigating the matter on its own. Ashley's admission was the most devastating. She discovered journal entries in which James described how, prior to everything collapsing, he purposely ruined the coding project we were working on. Knowing how important that shared interest was to our relationship, he had paid someone to hack and contaminate our work. Additional evidence has been discovered during Rachel's divorce procedures. He had been concealing substantial assets, including real estate bought under false pretenses, according to their joint tax forms. Even before our divorce, the forensic accountants were able to track down money transactions to offshore accounts. The extent of James's deceit has crushed my parents. When Dad found out about the concealed cameras in their home, he also suffered a little heart attack. James had been watching every member of the family, gathering information that he could use to control them. He kept records on everyone's vulnerabilities, secrets, and intimate moments. Today, the report from the criminal psychologist was made public. According to the report, James has one of the worst cases of obsessive personality disorder and psychopathic tendencies they have ever seen. According to his notebooks, he carefully planned every aspect of the devastation of my life, viewing it as an art form. Victims from the past have kept coming forward. Similar methods from James's background have been reported by 2 other families, though they are not as complex as what he did to me. These incidents, which date back to his time in college, demonstrate a distinct pattern of worsening conduct. Given the evidence that James had established a tiny network of blackmailed people who assisted him in maintaining his deceit, the prosecutor is now attempting to bring additional organized crime charges against James. Some were people he had financially compromised, and others were other professionals he had snuck on. I've kept my distance from efforts at family reconciliation in favor of assisting in the development of the most compelling legal argument. My attorneys claim that with the overwhelming amount of evidence, James's conviction is all but certain. Now their attention is on making sure he gets the harshest punishment imaginable. Although the tale has garnered media interest, I have turned down every invitation to be interviewed. I'm still focused on pursuing justice within the judicial system rather than going public. Nevertheless, a number of James's accomplices have begun speaking with reporters, exposing the entire scope of his network of deception. Next week, following the preliminary hearing, I'll provide another update. I'm currently preparing for what is expected to be a historic case in criminal justice and family law with my legal team. The conclusions of the preliminary hearing are more important than anyone could have predicted. I wanted to hold off on sharing this update until everything was finalized. Although James entered a guilty plea to all charges, the events in the courtroom were surprising. Against the advice of his attorney, he insisted on making a public statement. He described his entire plan for 45 minutes, not with regret but with a sickening sense of pride. He expressed no remorse, calling it his masterpiece of revenge. The judge's response was extraordinary. She disregarded the usual sentence criteria after hearing James's statement, pointing to his pathological pride and obvious determination to commit another crime. In order to run each count consecutively rather than concurrently, she imposed the maximum penalty. James will be imprisoned for 25 years with no chance of release for 18 of those years. James provided fresh details about additional victims throughout his statement, going beyond the incidents we were already aware of. In other states, he had tried similar tactics against 3 other families. His crimes may result in federal prosecution, according to the FBI's interstate investigation. His offshore accounts were the most startling discovery. He had been operating a consulting business for other compulsive people, teaching them how to ruin relationships and families, the forensic accountants found out. He had customers in several different nations. Now, Interpol is involved. In her testimony, Rachel described discovering a secret chamber in their basement that was stocked with monitors and monitoring gear. In addition to monitoring their home, he had set up cameras in my office, apartment, and even my vehicle. It was military-grade surveillance technology, according to the technical expert who inspected the arrangement. Ashley, my youngest daughter, made significant progress in her analysis of James's computer systems. She discovered encrypted files using her coding expertise, demonstrating that he had been preparing to grow his scam. He had meticulous records on the families of my co-workers, ready to ruin several relationships at once if I ever came close to establishing my innocence. The company's security mechanisms were completely redesigned as a result of their analysis. They found that James had used persuasion and extortion to undermine almost every department. In his own testimony, the CEO described discovering proof that James had been selling company secrets to finance his complex schemes. As an attorney, Lauren has been assisting the prosecution in constructing cases for James's other victims. She discovered a trend that went all the way back to his high school years. He had spent more than 25 years honing his craft. He had developed a network of enablers during his life, according to her inquiry. Betrayal Shadow, an exhibition at Madison's Art Gallery, showcased pieces she produced while dealing with this experience. She openly challenged a number of James's collaborators who were there at the event without their knowledge. Video recordings of their confessions served as proof for further charges. Olivia found out that James had been following her college friends, gathering damaging material to keep them quiet. She is currently developing procedures to stop similar manipulation schemes in college athletics by collaborating with school security across the country. Our family's psychological effects have resulted in an unforeseen development. Numerous prestigious colleges are examining the case as an illustration of persistent psychological manipulation. In order to improve detection and prevention tactics for incidents like this one, research teams are examining James's techniques. A support group for families impacted by pathological liars and manipulators has been established by my parents. They have discovered 5 further instances of James interfering in the lives of other families, some of which go back decades, thanks to this network. Due to these disclosures, a number of cold cases involving questionable family splits have been reopened. The judge combined compensatory and punitive penalties and sentenced James to pay $12 million in reparations. The forensic accountants discovered that he had accumulated more than $20 million from corporate espionage and consulting, all of which have been confiscated. In the future, I have turned down every attempt at reconciliation from my relatives. The years lost are irreparable, and the damage is too great. I'm concentrating on assisting in the construction of safeguards to stop similar exploitation from happening to others. James's law is now being considered by a number of state legislatures to strengthen the penalty for planned family destruction. I keep my anonymity intact, even though the story has garnered international attention. Rather, I'm developing tools to identify patterns of systematic familial manipulation in collaboration with cybersecurity professionals. Leading the technical development, Ashley is transforming our misery into something that could potentially benefit others. My last update will be this one. Although justice has been done, some wounds never completely go away. I'm going about my life with the intention of keeping others from going through what James did to our family. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you. My dad refused to spend Christmas with my bill, and now my mom is blaming my wife for everything. What should I do? Original post. This is a throwaway account as I have work colleagues on my mind that I don't want to know about my family drama, and spelling will be rubbish as I'm fuming right now. Obligatory names have been changed. So for the backstory, I 36F and married to the love of my life 36FK. We met when we were 17, she was out and proud whilst I was still in the closet, so we didn't start dating until I came out at 21. We got married in 2019 and have an adopted 4-year-old son Jack. This comes in relevant in a minute. My sister 27F Sarah has a long-term boyfriend 28M Steve who the family cannot stand. They've been together for 8 years and the whole family has hated him from the first time we met him. He is rude, obnoxious, arrogant and all in all a crappy human being. He's also someone that likes to claim that he is just honest, but if someone is honest back to him he flips out and sulks like a toddler. In fact, my toddler is better behaved than him. He isn't abusive to Sarah and doesn't direct these comments towards her, it's just the rest of us. He's actually a good partner to her and treats her well, which is his one redeeming quality. My dad and Kay hate him the most and will do anything to avoid him at family gatherings. Kay usually just ignores him and brushes off anything he says to her as she doesn't like conflict. However, there have been a few occasions that she has said something back, but it's usually said in a joking manner which amuses my dad to no end. My mum is a peacekeeper and will do anything to avoid drama, so she just changes the topic whenever he starts, but she and my grandparents all hate him just as much as the rest of us. Sarah is the only one that obviously doesn't hate him. Our son's birth mother Tess was Kay's best friend, who sadly died in 2021. This was a real shock as she had an underlying heart condition that she didn't know about and simply went to sleep one night and never woke up. Jack had been left alone in his cot all day screaming for his mom before Kay got worried that Tess wasn't answering her texts and went to their house to see if she was okay. She found Jack in his cot and Tess in her bed. We adopted Jack as no one in Tess's family was in a position to take him in. We raise him as our own, but he knows who Tess is. Obviously this is a very sensitive topic for Kay as it was so traumatic for her and Jack. Now, on to what happened last weekend. It was the anniversary of Tess's death on Saturday, so Kay, Jack and I went to visit her grave. Kay is always quiet after going to see her, and this time of year is especially hard for her. On Sunday we had a family gathering at my parents' house. These happen every couple of months as just a catch-up for everyone. At first nothing was out of the ordinary. Kay and my dad were off to the side talking as usual, only I could see that Kay was obviously struggling, so my dad and her went for a walk so she could clear her head. This is something they have done before, so nothing too unusual. However, Steve had an issue with this and asked why they had left and why he wasn't invited to walk with them. I explained that Tess and Kay just needed a minute. This wasn't good enough for Steve though, and he said she should have gotten over it by now. At this my granddad, who is naturally a very quiet guy, said that his best friend had died over 20 years ago and he still had days where he missed him so much it hurt. You don't just get over something like that. Steve shut at that. Kay and my dad got back and she was in a much better mood. We all sat down at the table for our late lunch and started chatting. Everything was fine at first until Steve started trying to butt into Kay's conversation with my granddad. When it was obvious that they weren't going to include him, he very loudly stated, "This is bullshit. She's getting all the attention of everyone because her friend died 3 fucking years ago. Get over it for fuck's sake, we're all sick of hearing about it." The whole table went silent and I took one look at Kay and knew she was about to go off on Steve. Only it didn't happen the way I thought. Rather than exploding at him, she looked at him very calmly and said that her and Granddad weren't talking about Tess. They were making plans to take him to the Christmas markets, but if he wants to be a dick then no problem. She then went on to say to him that everyone in the family hates him because he's a toxic narcissistic fuckwad. That whenever he can't come to a family gathering the whole family is much happier. That there is a reason he has no friends and that his own family can't stand to be around him. That reason is that he's rotten from the inside out and that Tess may have only been on this planet for 32 years, but she made a bigger impact on people than he would have if he lived until he was 150. That her funeral was rammed with people because she was so loved, whereas he'd be lucky if anyone other than Sarah was at his. After that, she got up and went to the back garden and I followed her. A few minutes later my dad came out and said that he'd told Sarah and Steve to leave. We went back inside and Kay apologized to everyone and said she should have just kept her mouth shut. Everyone other than my mom told her what she had done was right and it was about time someone told him. My dad then found it hilarious that a lesbian had been the one to tell him straight, which lightened the mood a lot. We spent the rest of the afternoon there before going to pick Jack up from Kay's mom's house as she had had him overnight on Saturday for us. The reason I'm making this post is that yesterday I got a call from Sarah saying that she and Steve wanted an apology from Kay or they weren't going to Christmas. When I reminded her that we wouldn't be at Christmas either as it is our year to spend it with Kay's mom so it made no difference to us, she got really upset saying that she wanted an apology because Kay was way out of line. I said she wasn't and that I wouldn't even contemplate asking her to apologize because I agreed with everything she said and so did everyone else there. She ended the call and I just went back to work. Then today my dad called me and asked if Kay's mom would mind a few more for Christmas as he was refusing to spend it with Steve, so he and my granddad needed someone else to go. Apparently after Sarah had called me she called mom and started ranting and my mom had told my dad to get Kay to apologize, which he said no to, and they had an argument and my dad has now decided that he's done with Steve even if that affects his relationship with Sarah. He's not having it anymore. My mom wants Sarah there, and she won't go without Steve, so my dad is going somewhere else and my granddad agreed with him. I texted Kay's mom and she said they were welcome, so now my mom is furious and saying that my dad and Kay are ripping the family apart. So basically this has turned into a shit show. Kay has said she will apologize if I want her to, just to keep the peace, but I've told her no way. Everything she said was true. I just don't know where to go from here, and the people in my life all hate Steve so much that Kay could have physically attacked him and they would all still think she is in the right. So that's why I'm asking internet strangers who might have had to deal with difficult family members. What can we do to get into a place where we can be around each other amicably? I'm struggling to see a way right now. Wow, didn't realize how long this got until I went to post it. Sorry about that. Some of OOP's comments. Commenter. For things to be peaceful, both parties need to want it. Kay did nothing wrong. I wouldn't ever spend another moment with Steve. I would let Sarah know I love her and will see her anytime, anywhere, but I'll never see Steve again. If you have one guest that basically wants to shit out on the holiday table, there's no path forward with them. OOP. If it was just Sarah upset, then I wouldn't care, but it's my mom. She tries so hard to keep the whole family together and she is devastated by what's going on. If it wasn't for her, then Sarah could go take a running jump for all I care right now. Sarah. This is the issue, that Steve and Sarah don't see anything wrong in what he's done. It was just him being honest. I would be happier for her to apologize if Steve and Sarah admitted that what he said was in the wrong as well. Without that, I'm being stubborn about it. My dad told Kay he will fall out with her if she apologizes, as she did nothing wrong. There was no screaming or shouting, she said it very calmly. I feel like I'm stuck between making my mom happy and doing what I believe to be right. To another commenter. My sister doesn't see anything wrong in what he says, as he's just being honest, but loses it when someone is honest back. I don't understand her anymore. Mom. Taking the high road and rising above it have been two of my mom's favorite things to say to us over the years. I just feel like enough is enough. He crossed a line this time that he can't come back from. I especially don't want my son around him when he's saying things like that about Tess. To another commenter. If I hear my mom say take the high road one more time, I'm gonna scream. I'm sick of the high road. I've been on it for 8 years. I'm happy on the low road now. Later that day. OOP. Well, I've just found out that my granny and pa, my mom's parents, are going to my uncle's for Christmas and Steve is not invited, so it looks like it's going to be just Mom, Sarah and Steve for Christmas this year. How OOP feels about that? Vindicated, as my mom is like her parents, they're all peacekeepers, and if ever they have had enough, then it just shows that he's not just stepped over the line, he's ran right past it. Mom. Kay's mom has already told her that if she changes her mind, then she is welcome at her house. Even if it's Christmas morning, she is more than welcome. Obviously Steve and Sarah aren't invited at all, but it's good that my mom has the option at least. Later reflection. I have realized that he has been trying to target Kay and my dad's relationship, as they're very close. They have traveled all over the country visiting class car shows together, which Steve has tried to get in on, but he doesn't know anything about cars, so there's no point in him going even if they did like him. I actually think he's been trying to push Kay and I out of the family so that he gets my dad to himself, even though my dad can't stand him. Update post. Hi, I know how much this community loves an update, so I thought I would give you one, as things seem to be sorting themselves out, kind of. After I wrote my last post, a few things happened in the next couple of hours. First thing was that I spoke to my grandparents on my mom's side. They were there when this all happened, but they're like my mom and just constantly try to keep the peace. That's where she gets it from. They were supposed to be spending Christmas with my mom this year but had changed their minds and decided to spend it with my uncle instead. They have made the decision to not be around Steve either, as he causes too much drama. They asked if they could come and see us and Jack on the 23rd before they head off to my uncle's, which I happily agreed to. This really surprised me and it outright shocked my mom, as like I said, they are the biggest take the high road type people I've ever met, but even they'd had enough. The next thing that happened was my dad called to let me know that Steve and Sarah had now decided that they want Kay to make a public apology in front of the whole family and admit she was lying and that the family loves Steve. He was laughing as he told me this and called them delusional, so any small chance of a superficial apology went out the window. The third thing that happened was Jack getting home from the after-school club with a recorder that I'm sorely tempted to shove up the teacher's backside. So all in all, it wasn't a great day. Through talking to people on here, I also realized that Steve has been trying to push Kay and I out of the family. Organizing trips that he knows we would be able to go on. We wouldn't have gone on them anyway, as a weekend away with him sounds worse than a paper cut to the eyeball, and him constantly trying to get my dad away from Kay whenever we are all together. I think this is because he is jealous of Kay and Dad's relationship, as they're very close and go on trips to classic car shows several times a year together, usually with my granddad as well. Anyway, things went quiet for a few days until the weekend. Our town has a big Christmas fair that runs from November through December, and we always go to it with Mom, Dad, Granddad, and Kay's mom. We decided to cheer my mom up a bit to go on Sunday and then out for dinner after. My mom was told that if Sarah or Steve showed up then we would all leave, and she promised they wouldn't be there. Things were a bit awkward at first, but settled after a while. At one point Jack got my mom and dad to take him on the giant snow slide, and as my mom walked back over to us she had tears in her eyes. I pulled her to one side to see what was going on, and she said that whilst waiting in line, Jack had said he was happy Uncle Steve wasn't here. When my mom asked why, he said that Uncle Steve was a bad man. My mom tried to say that he wasn't, but in typical stubborn 4-year-old fashion, He had argued and said he learned in school that people who say mean things all the time are bad people, and Uncle Steve said mean things all the time, so he was a bad man and that he didn't like him. There had been a case of bullying in his class a few weeks ago and the teacher had done a lesson on how wrong bullying is, so I think that's where this came from. This finally broke through to my mom. If even a 4-year-old can see what a horrible prick the man is, then she had to as well. She said that she felt stuck because she hated Steve and agreed with everything that Kay has said, but she loves Sarah and doesn't want to isolate her. I told her I would always be there for her, but I wasn't putting myself, Jack or Kay through being around Steve again, and she needed to think about what she wants. Not what I want or Dad or Kay or Jack or her parents or Sarah or Steve, but what she wants. She went quiet and then said that Kay's mom had told her she was welcome at hers for Christmas if she wanted to, and that she could decide on Christmas Day if she wanted. Kay's mom would save her a plate. We went back to the group and a little while later I saw Mom and Kay's mom having a deep discussion whilst walking behind us. Neither will say what they talked about, but Mom seemed a bit happier after their talk. They have also been talking since, as yesterday my mom told me that she will be coming to Kay's mom's for Christmas and they've been talking about going shopping together next week. When Mom told Sarah after calling me, Sarah predictably lost her mind and said that Mom was choosing us over her. My mom told her she was choosing to have a good Christmas rather than being belittled and made miserable, all for the sake of Steve and his so-called honesty. Sarah then called me and asked if I was happy that I'd won. She then did the unforgivable and used a few homophobic slurs towards me and Kay and called Jack the bastard of a whore. I ended the call, blocked her everywhere, and then let my family know what had happened and that I never wanted to speak to her again. They're all as appalled as I am, and my granny, Mom's mom, called Sarah and apparently told her she was dead to her as she won't have a bigot in the family. Sarah has been trying to reach out to apologize because she knows she has stepped over the unforgivable line, but I've just kept blocking the fake accounts that she's making on IG. Steve tried reaching out to my dad after this, and when he eventually answered, Steve tried to say that Sarah was just angry and didn't mean it. According to Mom, Dad ended up giving him a verbal lashing and told him that he was the worst thing that had ever happened to Sarah and our family. My dad has told Sarah he is disgusted with her, but will be there for her if she leaves Steve. Until then, good luck. Mom has gone low contact as well, but wants to keep the door open so that Sarah is not completely isolated. I had a few people saying that Steve may be abusive towards Sarah, but I really don't think he is. He usually acts like a dick when the attention isn't on him. He knows that when he says dickish things, then all the attention is on him and he revels in it. After Sarah's outburst, I just think that they're both toxic and feed off each other's toxicity. She lets him get away with the things he says because she gets pleasure out of watching us all bite our tongues and keep quiet. So, Mom's angry, Dad's angry, our 3 grandparents are angry, extended family are angry, and Kay is being my rock, but I can tell she's really angry about what she said towards Jack. I'm just sad and done with it all. At least now I know what she really thinks about Jack, Kay and myself, so there's that. Not the perfect update, but we move on. It will be nice this Christmas to have both sides of the family together for the first time and not have to worry about Steve being a dick, but I'm sad that this is how my relationship with my sister has ended. I'm trying to get into the Christmas spirit, but it's a tough one right now. The only things that make me smile are Kay and Jack being goofy idiots to cheer me up. However, the recorder can go to hell. I curse whoever invented the thing, like seriously, fuck you. Thanks for all the support in my original post and opening my eyes to a few things. Maybe internet strangers are the way to go for advice after all. Hope you all have a good Christmas/holidays. Some of OOP's comments. Commenter, I don't think the dickish Bill and Sarah saga had concluded. I'm glad you'll have a peaceful Christmas in theory. I just think the pair of them are not convinced yet that they're shut out. OOP. It wouldn't surprise me if they try and turn up to my parents for Christmas, but we won't be there, so they won't get far. As long as they stay away from me, Kay and Jack, then I don't care what they do. Commenter. Many small children playing recorders with more enthusiasm that skill follow Steve everywhere. OOP. This just made me laugh a little too hard. Thanks for that. Editor's note. Wasn't sure whether to mark this one as concluded or ongoing. I've tentatively marked it as ongoing, but I'm happy to change it. Now to the next story, story 2. My boyfriend wants more intimacy, but it's exhausting me. How do I talk to him about it and find a balance? Original post. My boyfriend and I have been together for 2 years now. He is my first relationship and even my first kiss. We met at university during activities, became friends, and then started dating. He is so polite and kind, and also really sweet and smart as well. We can talk about our common interests and hobbies for hours on end. Since I was a virgin in the relationship, he was not. We took it slow and only had sex when I was ready, which was about 8 months after we became a couple. After that, we had sex about once every 1 or 2 weeks, depending on if we found the time during our studies and if we were exhausted. Sometimes during exam time we had it once a month or every 5 weeks. But slowly he started to initiate more and more. At first I didn't mind and loved the attention he was giving me. I felt attractive and beautiful, which helped my body image issues a lot. Soon it turned into him asking for it every single day, sometimes twice a day during weekends or if we have a slow day with little work and studies. A month ago we went on a vacation together and he basically jumped on me as soon as we got into our hotel room. We barely got to do anything as he wanted to have sex 2 if not 3 times a day. I came back so exhausted from the vacation. I even started saying no to him eating me out, or role play or switching in position, just to get it over with sooner. At this point sex does nothing for me anymore. The mere action and physical stimulation feels enjoyable, yes, but just sex without anything else just isn't worth the time or effort for me. I need a story and emotion with it, lots of dirty talk and role-playing and some hot situations. I know that takes time and effort to prepare, but it gets me going wildly. But even if I could have that every day I wouldn't want it. It's literally physically too exhausting. Also I feel like too much sex kinda destroys the magic. I know that he takes a lot emotionally and sexually out of sex. It's making him feel loved and desired and I don't want to take it from him, but I actually caught myself don't doing any makeup anymore and not wearing tight or short clothing but baggy ones instead to maybe deter him from wanting sex so much. TLDR, my boyfriend started initiating sex more and more. I find it exhausting and can't take it anymore. How do I negotiate fewer sexual encounters without making him feel unloved? Update. I spend a lot of time reading through everyone's replies and looking inwards about how I feel. I gathered my thoughts and spent a few days making a list of what I wanted to say when we had the big conversation. On a weekend when we had planned to spend the day together, I sat him down and told him the following points. I love him to the moon and back and want to show him that I love him, make him feel desired, loved and appreciated, but having so much sex with such frequency is physically exhausting to me, which causes me to avoid sex and even sex acts I enjoy because I don't have enough energy and motivation to do it. This also causes me to orgasm not as often anymore. I also need time to physically recover before it may even start to become painful. I feel like sex has become the single defining aspect of our relationship, and many other parts like doing activities together, romantic dates, just talking and cuddling have taken a backseat. I also feel exhausted emotionally and underappreciated from giving as much as I can, which I gladly do for the people I love, while little comes back from the other side of the relationship. I then proceeded to explain the things I like during sex and what makes me go wild, hoping to show him that I still want to have sex with him. I also made a few more compliments just to keep the vibe positive and because I meant it. He reacted pretty well, all things considered. He listened and let me finish, but asked for a little time to think about it. Obviously I gladly agreed. We spend the rest of the day together without him initiating once. At the end of the day he said that he wants me to enjoy sex just as much as he does and that he loves me. I was really hopeful for the next week and a half. We spent our time together like usual and he asked for sex about 1/2 as often as before our talk. We even had days without sex at all. He also started to ask, "Do you want to have sex with me?" Instead of physically initiating like he did before, like touching me somewhere, hugging me from behind and similar things. He also stopped asking for pictures of me, and when he did it were just selfies. I was so happy that I even took the initiative once and he seemingly loved it when I asked for sex. Then one day he sat me down with a stern look and said that he hated what this relationship has turned into. To him it feels like we are now just roommates or platonic friends instead of lovers. He told me that the one time I initiated after he was overjoyed to finally fuck me again, his heart was broken because I suddenly wasn't as submissive as usually. I asked to be eaten out and was on top with some more dominant dirty talk, and that all of that is not what he signed up for. He doesn't want to walk on eggshells waiting for me when I'm finally in the mood, but has what he deserves in the relationship. Basically he gave me an ultimatum. Either we return to how it was before the talk starting right now or he leaves me. Guess who doesn't have a boyfriend anymore? I spent the last few days bawling my eyes out and eating lots of ice cream and watching some shitty shows. What he said hurt me a lot and I do not love him anymore, but still the feeling of loss and sadness is all too real. He was my first relationship and for the past 2 years he was my entire world. No, I have to gather up the broken shards he left behind. TLDR, I took your advice and talked with him about my feelings. He pretended to be okay with it for a while and then left me after demanding more sex again. OOP added more info in the comments. Comment 1, I have an update if you want more information. I have a pretty high libido as well and I love good, sensual sex, and I want it quite often as I can go multiple times a week. But it was so often that we basically didn't do anything else besides it, and he was emotionally checked out when the possibility of sex wasn't on the table. It was so much that I was physically uncomfortable. Not to mention his really bad behavior once I told him I wanted a break sometimes. I had difficulties saying no, because I wanted to make him feel loved that way, until I realized that he just wants to take everything he wants from me without giving any emotional connection, romance, or care for me as a person. I hate that people throw around this sexual incompatibility argument, because if he said he wanted someone he can fuck at least 2 a day anyway he likes and I can't and don't want to do that, that would be one thing. But he shouted at me, demanded we do it how he likes it, and that I apologize for ruining everything by voicing my concerns for my well-being. He also said that he deserves to just take everything he wants from me. So please keep that in mind when you do your judgment. Yes, we are not together anymore. I cut him off after his scary tantrum. Comment 2: Thank you for your empathy and for the added context. I know that my update gave more information, but that's also because I didn't see a lot of the stuff he did to me and didn't do for me after that tantrum. Until that point I wanted to give everything to him, because I was head over heels for him, until he showed me that he didn't feel that way back. I get it. I like sex just as much as the next gal. It's just that I have a pretty broad spectrum of frequency I would be okay with depending on what my partner feels like. Sex once a week or 2 weeks? Totally fine as long as the other intimacy is fulfilled. Sex every other day? Great, as well as long as it's an equal relationship and we both get what we want and non-sexual intimacy isn't pushed to the side, which sadly happened to me. In the end I not only felt really sore and exhausted, but also used and reduced my body. If we broke up because of sexual incompatibility, that would still hurt, but we could part ways amicably. This way he just hurt me for no reason. Comment 3: I get that sexual incompatibility can be a huge deal breaker for people, but firstly it's not like we suddenly were not having any sex anymore. In those 10 days between our 2 conversations we still had sex about 5-6 times, plus making out, plus some other sexual stuff besides full-on PIV. Also it's the way he treated me. He shouted at me, demanded we return to normal by having sex as often as he wants again, no matter my feelings, and with me being submissive. He also demanded an apology and an apology session. So much could be inferred. But before all that, for the last weeks and months he left me emotionally starved. He only looked out for his sexual gratification while I had to cherish the few little drops of romance, friendship and companionship. When it didn't involve sex or could lead to sex he was kinda emotionally distant. Cute dates, cuddling and intimacy without sexuality and hobbies together was few and far in between. I don't fault him for not wanting sex, I fault him for how he treated me and how little he was able to compromise. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you. My daughter was invited to perform at her cousin's wedding but was later smeared online because her performance drew more attention than the bride. My F49 cousin, F23, asked my daughter, F16, to perform at her wedding reception, but became bitter upon seeing the positive reception to her act. She has since posted about her online, and my daughter is considering quitting original post. I hope this is okay to share here. The reason I'm posting is because of my daughter who's been hurting in the aftermath of a recent performance. I'm sorry in advance for how long this turned out, but any advice from fellow aerialists would be greatly appreciated. My cousin Dana, not real name, had her wedding 2 weeks ago, and she asked if my daughter could perform at her reception. My daughter, Jane, also fake name, has practiced Silk's Lyra for the past few years at a nearby circus studio, and she's also performed with through the studio at small gigs. She hopes to continue into adulthood and become a professional teacher, but this recent incident has shaken her confidence. She has a private Instagram to document her progress performances, and I only post certain performances on my Facebook. Her first gig with the studio and her first recital, to name a few we're proud of. Some of our relatives saw her performances through my socials, and they watched her perform at her studio's Christmas recital when we hosted Christmas at our home a few years back. Something that surprised her when they visited early to see her. I love how they coordinated that. And Jane said it was her loudest cheering section to date. Dana was one of the relatives who came up early to see her Christmas recital, and she's always been super supportive. She asked me if Jane would be willing to perform at the reception, and I asked on her behalf. Jane was honored and excited when I did, and we already had a portable rig for her too. Though we ended up renting a taller one from her studio. Dana got the idea from a YouTube video featuring an aerialist who performed at a wedding reception, and she showed us while requesting white silks and a white outfit. We scoped out the venue and purchased white silks along with a white costume that Dana approved of, and Jane was really excited throughout. Jane even worked on choreography to a song that Dana requested, and she put a lot of time into it, even asking one of her coaches to help her with it. Dana insisted on paying her for the gig despite Jane not expecting to be paid, and she paid her a few hundred. However, Dana's had a change of heart. Jane received a standing ovation after her performance that surprised her, but we didn't know anything was wrong until Dana went on Facebook a few days later. Dana said she didn't approve of the outfit Jane wore and that she specifically told her to not wear white. She also said my husband and I pressured her to have Jane perform and that the performance gave off an unclassy vibe, lies that my husband and I couldn't believe. We sent Dana numerous costume links, and we purchased the one she liked. There was also nothing wrong with Jane's performance. Dana was one of the people cheering afterwards. Jane received nothing but compliments afterward, but I'm disgusted that she had to see that post after all the work she put into it. The post also had comments disabled for what it's worth. I called Dana to confront her about the lies, but she didn't pick up numerous calls. I then called her parents who, like us, had received messages about her post, and they said that Dana was wrong. They apologized on her behalf and said they were also disgusted. Dana's mom also said that Dana vented to her before making her post a few days after the reception. Dana told her she regretted asking Jane to perform given the attention, compliments and cheers she received for it. Her mom also said that she felt upstaged with Jane wearing white and having to hear how good she was. Dana's parents tried to call her after she made her post, but she didn't answer after their previous conversation ended with her parents telling her she shouldn't be bitter because she specifically asked Jane to perform. Dana's parents reported the post along with us/others, and we've told the truth to those who reached out along with a post to explain our side, stand up for Jane. We have text proof of sending costume links that Dana chose from. Dana's parents also requested to talk to Jane on the phone to apologize for Dana's behavior, and my husband and I told Jane that Dana was wrong, and that we'll be distancing ourselves from Dana permanently. Dana's parents were surprised at her behavior, and we were too having seen her grow up. Granted, we only see extended family for Thanksgiving and Christmas because we live far, but other relatives were surprised too as it seemed to come from left field. Maybe there's a side of Dana we'll never know from our limited holiday, milestone interactions, but our focus is Jane. We've tried to cheer Jane up by offering to take her to dinner among other activities, but she's been hurting, which is why I'm here. Jane hasn't practiced, at home or the studio, since the reception. And I don't want to invade her space at her studio by telling anyone there, in case she doesn't want anyone to know. She asked me to return the white silks and costume after being so excited to receive them. She also said she's going to take an extended break from aerial photography to reconsider if she wants to continue. Aside from aerial photography, she's taken a break from seeing non-aerial friends too, choosing to pretty much keep to herself. We would appreciate any advice from fellow aerialists on how to lift her spirits. We remind her of how we're proud of her, along with the many compliments she received, but she's asked for space and to not talk about it. We're going to respect that and let time do its thing, but we'll consider any advice from other aerialists who can relate to the time and work she put in. Sorry for this being so long, but we appreciate anyone who reads and takes the time to reply. Comments from the first post. Some meat with skin. This is a rare story on this site where everyone, except the villain, does everything right. If this happened to an adult or even an older teenager, she would probably still be hurt, but be able to see that Dana is the one with the issue. But at 16, she's still forming her idea of herself. It sounds like she's taking this all on as a reflection of herself. I'm not someone who can be in the spotlight. My desire to perform hurts my family. I would really consider therapy. You could say all the right things to her, and I bet you have, but at 16 it's hard to hear your mom. Alternatively, and I'm sorry to say this, but is it possible that Dana's new husband gave Jane any inappropriate attention? That might explain why Dana is so upset when she presumably should have known exactly what to expect, although certainly wouldn't excuse it. If there were any opportunities for Jane and the new husband to be alone, I would really look into that also, because it would also explain why Jane hasn't practiced since the reception even though the drama started a few days later. It is an extreme place to go, but I would just ask yourself if there was an opportunity for him to be inappropriate because she is withdrawing from her entire social life. When I was a teenager, driving up to the next city helped me sometimes. Want to take a drive? Is still a question I ask myself when I feel stuck and hopeless. Go to the big aquarium and get canolas at the outlet mall or something equally random. Maybe she'll open up or get out of her head, or maybe y'all will just have a nice day. Lots of love to you and your family. Mistral 19. Jealousy is horrible, and Dana has just made herself look bad to anyone that came to the wedding. Also, just for reference, I have performed at multiple weddings and have always had a white costume. It suits the theme and is no way comparable to a wedding dress. Leslie Barbnope. I always see aerialists in white at weddings. Take comfort in the internet OP and hopefully they can use it as a defense with Dana. If she wants to be that way, just post the receipts of how she asked her what to wear, etc. If she's willing to say that for a 16-year-old. Or let it go, it'll pass because I promise Dana will have some new crazy thing to do very soon. These types always do. Chelsea Sphere 89. The bride is petty, immature and ridiculous. First off, you must see that. Help her see it too if she doesn't already. When people show you who they are, listen. This is a painful, but valuable lesson that your daughter is learning very early in her performance teaching career. Just like any obstacle or difficulty in life standing between us and the things we desire, she has the choice to either let it beat her down, or let it lift her up and make more determined than ever. If she truly wants this and does eventually go on to be an aerial coach and/or performer, she will face even more challenges. This is only serving to prepare her to face those. Making art is vulnerable, sometimes people won't like it. But that tells you more about them than about you most of the time. We'll love dogs. Dana wanted her wedding to be all about her, which is fair to an extent, but obviously not to this extent, and I think she was happy to have a beautiful performance done for her, but forgot that people will congratulate the performer, rather than the person who hired the performer. Given how extreme the response was, I would be a bit worried what someone else mentioned about the outside chance that Dana's husband said did something inappropriate, but my guess, and hope, is it's just a general attention thing. Regardless, it sounds like you and Dana's parents are handling things as best you can. Defending your daughter but respecting her privacy and boundaries sounds exactly like the right thing to do. Well done you. I would just continue to be there for your daughter in a low-pressure way and make sure she knows she has safe people to talk to whenever she's ready. Maybe see if there are any non-aerial activities any of her friends are down to do with her. Maybe something like rock climbing, which can feel less performance-oriented and attention-grabbing but can still feel fun for an aerialist because there's a fair amount of strength crossover. Hopefully she'll be comfortable with aerial photography again in future, but I think just trying to help her not socially withdraw too much would be good for her well-being for now. So sorry she's going through this, she sounds like a great kid and a very talented aerialist. Update. Before I get into what's happened since my last post, I want to thank everyone who took the time to comment. 2 pieces of advice really stood out, and I'll get to them shortly. Since my original post, Dana's Facebook post is gone. I don't know if she deleted it or enough people reported it for Facebook to remove it, but we're glad it's gone. She never apologized to us, or Jane, or even bothered to call, so our position on being permanently done with Dana stands. My husband and I made a post on my Facebook addressing the lies she spewed about our daughter, and we shared photo proof of Dana's text where she approved of Jane's white costume from links we sent, not to mention the song choice she sent us too. Better yet, Dana's mother reposted it on her account, which really surprised me. Dana's mother wrote that they loved Jane's act and that they disapproved of Dana's actions. My husband and I also made sure that Jane was okay with us addressing it on Facebook, and she said it was fine. Normally, I wouldn't use Facebook to address drama if aimed at me, but since this involves a grown adult attacking a minor, we felt the need to address it publicly because she disparaged her publicly, and Jane will remember whether we stood up for her or not years from now. I had a chance to speak with Dana's mother since my original post on the phone, and she spoke to Dana again after our last call. Dana reiterated how she regretted asking Jane to perform, but she harped on the standing ovation that bothered her the most. Dana told her that she expected Jane to get some polite applause, but that the overwhelming response really set her over the edge because she expected the loudest cheers to be when she and her husband entered the reception, but that went to Jane instead. Dana and her husband also received a great reception when they entered the reception, but Jane's performance did too, and Dana didn't expect it. Heck, even Jane was surprised by it too. She never received a standing ovation from a solo act before. But Dana's mother believes that if Dana had asked someone to sing who received a similar reception, Dana's jealousy would have been all the same. Someone suggested seeing if Jane would be interested in speaking to a therapist given how hurtful Dana's comments could be for a teen, and Jane said she's open to it so long as it isn't a counselor at school because, as of now, she doesn't want anyone at school or her studio to know about the incident, and she vaguely told the coach who helped her choreograph that it went fine. We will respect her privacy request as it's her right to control the narrative. But in the same vein, I suggested therapy for Dana to Dana's mother since her reaction might be a bigger insecurity, and she said she'd ask. The other thing someone suggested was the possibility of Dana's husband, or anyone, making an inappropriate comment to Jane during the reception that made her shut down and not want to see friends or practice days before Dana's post. My husband decided to ask her, and Jane said no when he did. If something happened, perhaps she'd be more comfortable telling a therapist with time. But on the bright side, she said she might want to try a different aerial studio because she doesn't want to answer questions about how it went, or share a video, at her home studio, so we will help her find somewhere new as she asked. We hope she doesn't permanently leave her current studio because she has friends and coaches who are supportive, and she performs with that studio's troupe at festivals gigs. But I personally understand the need to sometimes go somewhere where nobody knows you for a break, and we hope that that will help her. She hasn't said definitely yet. But if we do, we'll take her. She still wants an extended break from aerial photography in the meantime. But even if when she goes back, she said she may never want to perform again and would rather do it leisurely. One of the reasons she doesn't want to return to her home studio where she's a part of their troupe. She asked if we'd tell her troupe coach that she won't perform with them anymore if it comes to it. And if that's what she wants down the road, then we will. Hopefully time heals this wound and helps her at least keep the friends she has there, but we can only hope. Comments from the update. Fluffykins_pie. I'm so glad that you and the rest of the family are backing Jane up as much as possible. Hopefully the support you show her now will eventually win out over Dana's hateful behavior. I also hope that Dana actually gets therapy, because going after a minor like that was beyond out of line. Maybe the suggestion coming from her own mom will make Dana reevaluate and make some changes. But regardless, it sounds like you guys are doing a great job parenting. I'm so sorry this happened, but the absolute best thing you can do is just keep showing Jane that you have her back and it's her decision what she decides to do from here. We'd be happy to have her back if and when she decides to return to the aerial community. Half Angel. I can see the positives in here that have happened since the last post. Thank you for updating. I have been thinking of you all. It does sound like Jane is still blaming herself and that will need unlocking, as that mindset could spill over into other aspects of her life, stopping her achieving her full potential. She needs to realize that this is bridezilla jealousy that got directed towards her, nothing to do with her, and if an aunt had received that attention it too would have got squashed. Perhaps angling her to perform is fine, just never a family wedding again. And please ask her again in a few weeks' time if any inappropriate comments were made or done. Sometimes it can take a while to feel comfortable enough to say it out loud. It's not uncommon for boys to take 30 years before they say something. I feel like her coach needs to know that the performance was amazing, but to know that there was fallout afterwards. They don't need to know exactly, but it will help explain the actions and ease the road back there for Jane. Please give her a big hug from me. Now to the next story, Story 2. I child-proofed for my in-laws visit, but my husband thought I was overreacting. Now he's gone further after day 1 with our nephew. Original post, I am at 26F, and my husband is 29M. We have been married for 5 years and we went to Berlin right after marriage since we both found really well-paying jobs. Meanwhile both of our families, parents, siblings etc., still live back in Greece and we usually visit back occasionally. Now me and my husband don't have any children and we don't plan to have any. We enjoy buying expensive things and experiencing things we never got to as children, such as nice furniture in our home, going to exotic restaurants with friends, travel, hobbies, and generally just our lives with each other exactly the way it is. But that's just how my husband thinks. His family is very traditional and every married couple has at least one kid. This time my husband invited my Bill and CL to visit us with their 3-year-old son for 2 weeks. This would be the first time they've traveled with their son and the first time we would be hosting our nephew at our home. Now our nephew is known to be going through the terrible twos and has been throwing tantrums and breaking things lately, so I did some child-proofing in our home a day before my in-laws were due to arrive. I removed all the glass and ceramic decor. I swapped out our linen tablecloth for a plastic one. I locked up our intoxication devices. I also covered our sofas with a plushy fabric cover. Our sofa's fabric is white cashmere, because my nephew likes to snack while watching TV and we can always take it outside and dust off food crumbs. I also changed my maid's schedule to come in 5 days a week instead of 3 so she can help prepare breakfast and make sure the house is tidy. However, when my husband saw all of my changes he kind of got upset. He told me he felt that I was preparing our house as if we were hosting messy and uncivilized people. And asked me why I don't make these changes when our friends in Berlin who have kids come over for dinner. He also said that he's never seen our friends make these sorts of changes in their own home for their kids. I don't understand this comparison at all. Coming over for dinner for 3 hours and staying at a place for a couple of weeks is very different. And we've visited our in-laws enough to see how chaotic their home can get, to the point where my Bill and SIL keep mostly plastic items in their homes for convenience. AITA. Top comments. Tulip Afternoon, NTA. Instead of worrying the entire visit that their kid could ruin something expensive, the visiting parents can rest assured that the space has been child-proofed. As long as all the changes don't make the space uncomfortable, for example squeaky plastic couch covers or all decor being hidden so the place is bare, I think it makes a lot of sense. You are making the visit less stressful for everyone. Horror reveal 7618. He told me he felt that I was preparing our house as if we were hosting messy and uncivilized people. He's quoting the definition of a toddler here. OOP is voted NTA Update 1. Same post. Edit. We hadn't spoken since we had our fight last night, and my in-laws are supposed to be landing in the morning. My husband brought food from a restaurant I liked and told me he wanted to apologize. He told me he overreacted because he wasn't admitting to himself how different his brother is as a person ever since he became a dad, and that his life is going in a very different direction with more financial hardships too, and that makes him angry and helpless. He told me he misdirected his frustration at me and thought what I did was really nice, especially since he is more finicky than I am. I tried my best to make him feel not guilty and responsible for the lives and decisions of other grown-ups. But I'm so relieved he came around on his own. Update 2. Same post. Edit 2. So guys, it's officially day 1 of the in-laws visit, and my husband has now gone an extra step and put away most of the lamps in our house because they are glass and super dangerous for a toddler to be around. We have about 35 'cause we hate ceiling lights. When we picked up our in-laws from the airport and were driving them back, my nephew accidentally poured a bag of chips all over the back seat and floor mats. Everyone just laughed, but I know my husband was horrified inside, and now he's been vacuuming the backseat area for 2 hours now, lol. Oh, and in-laws super appreciated our baby proofing. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you. My mom prioritized my sister's brief romance over supporting me during motherhood and the birth of her grandchild. I, 32F, work as an emergency room physician at a large Boston hospital. My baby was christened 2 days ago after I gave birth to her a few weeks ago. My mother, 58F, is now upset that I did not ask her to the wedding or even select her as a godparent. I would like to describe the complex circumstances that resulted in this choice. My relationship with my ex, 34M, a cardiologist at our hospital, ended during my pregnancy, thus I voluntarily became a single mother. After meeting during residency, we dated for 3 years and lived together for 2, which I considered to be a stable relationship. Given our steady jobs and long-term relationship, I brought up marriage when I found out I was expecting. He said nonetheless, that he needed more time to determine whether he was prepared for marriage. I knew I couldn't wait forever at that point in my life because I had a demanding job in emergency medicine. I threatened to end our relationship if he didn't propose. I'm accustomed to making snap decisions because I work as an emergency room physician, and I was ready to be a single mother. Even before I gave him the ultimatum, I knew in my heart that we would end our relationship. What successful marriage begins with one after all? I was right when he moved out in a matter of weeks. At first, he said he wanted to play the role of father. But he also decided he wasn't prepared for fatherhood following our separation. He's now paying child support after I hired a lawyer and spoke with legal medical colleagues. He is welcome to visit at any time, but he hasn't expressed any interest in me, even though I have full custody. I need to focus on my cardiology fellowship right now, he said, almost as if I weren't balancing my own medical career while pregnant. However, my mother's actions during this whole ordeal are the true problem, not my ex. I was mentally in a bad place when my relationship ended early in my pregnancy. Since we are educated to spot the symptoms of depression as medical professionals, I realized I needed help. My coworkers also noticed, particularly when working lengthy overnight shifts in the emergency room. Families usually help out in these kinds of situations, but my friends were the only ones who really stood by me. While running their own medical practices, my 2 best friends from residency, Kelly, 31F, a pediatrician, and Maria, 32F, another emergency room physician, came to see me as much as they could. I automatically chose them to be my daughter's godmothers because they were the only people who were with me when I went into labor. My mother's exclusion was not a hasty decision. I worked extra ER shifts to earn money for maternity leave while I was pregnant, living alone in my condo close to the hospital. Working 12-hour shifts while pregnant and handling trauma cases wasn't easy. Since Kelly's hospital is distant from mine and Maria is married with a small son, I turned down my friend's offer to stay with me closer to my due date. I had wanted to depend on my mom. She abruptly became more active in my life after finding out about my pregnancy on social media. We weren't very close before that because she usually gave preference to my younger sister, Lisa, 25F. There was an obvious division in our family dynamics. Dad and I were one unit, and Lisa and Mom were another. We only got to see each other on birthdays or holidays once I departed for college. When my dad died 2 years ago after an unexpected heart attack, everything changed. I was working an emergency room shift that night, so I wasn't blind to the irony. My already shaky relationship with my mother and sister was all but broken after his funeral. Even though Lisa and Mom were still inseparable, There was always an imperceptible barrier between us when I first saw them. I eventually came to terms with the fact that Mom valued Lisa more. I found it strange that Mom's conduct altered when I told her I was pregnant. As she started to visit, she expressed her excitement about being a grandma. I phoned her to ask her to stay with me during the last few weeks of my pregnancy, when I was having a lot of back discomfort after working longer shifts. She made a commitment but abruptly canceled, saying she didn't feel safe leaving her house unattended because of thefts in her neighborhood. Despite my severe disappointment, I handled things on my own and didn't pursue the issue. But my mother was the first person I phoned when I went into labor while working the night shift at the hospital. When I told her that I needed her there with me, she first claimed that she was too busy to make it happen. I couldn't comprehend what kind of obligations she could have because it was 2 a.m. on a Sunday. She finally acknowledged that she couldn't be there because she had to be there for Lisa when I pressured her, getting more and more upset in between contractions. She was unable to be with me during the last few weeks of my pregnancy, apparently because Lisa had moved in with her a few weeks prior. Being there for Lisa was the first priority, according to my mother, who revealed that she had recently been abandoned by her boyfriend and was in a very vulnerable state of mind. I was in too much pain to fight, but I honestly couldn't understand how anything could be more significant than being there when your grandchild was born. I hung up after she gave me her explanation and instead called Maria and Kelly. Maria, who works at my hospital, arrived in 15 minutes, took care of all the medical papers, and Kelly arrived right in the delivery room. They supported me the entire time, including helping me get settled for the next few days until I felt confident enough to be alone with the baby. In contrast, my mother didn't get in touch with me for a whole week following the birth of my child. Behaving as casually as if nothing had happened, she texted to ask whether she could come that day. "Hello sweetie, I thought I'd stop by today to see my granddaughter," she wrote in her message. "What time is most effective?" I didn't reply since that really got under my skin. I acted as though I wasn't home when she unexpectedly arrived that night and stayed until she departed. After that, she kept messaging and tried contacting me multiple times, but I never answered. It's amazing that she never felt the need to express regret or even to admit what had occurred. She continued to send texts like, "Missing my grandbaby" and "Can't wait to babysit," acting as though nothing was wrong. She must have noticed I was angry with her after a time. But rather than offering a clear apology, she had Lisa text me to try to justify what she had done. The fact that Lisa's letter began, "I'm really sorry that Mom couldn't be there because of me when you went into labor," only served to exacerbate the problem. However, "You must comprehend what I was going through." She went on to say that after dating him for just 2 weeks, she had been dumped by someone she had loved for a very long time. She seems to have had feelings for this man since college. She never made a move because he had a girlfriend at the time. Even after graduating, she remained friends with him, stayed in touch with him, and still harbored feelings for him. After a recent breakup with his fiancée, that guy asked Lisa out 3 weeks later. After 2 weeks of dating, he told her he was not ready for another committed relationship so soon after terminating his long-term one and that he simply wanted to be friends. He blocked her everywhere and called her psychotic and crazy for taking a casual rebound so seriously after Lisa became upset and began to argue with him. In a normal situation, I could have felt sorry for her. However, Lisa is not a youngster going through her first heartbreak. She is 25 years old. He was only using her as a rebound, and she should have known it. Even worse, her friends specifically advised her not to approach him because they knew he had recently ended a committed relationship. I couldn't bring myself to feel sorry for her. And I was incensed that our mother chose not to attend her granddaughter's birth because she couldn't handle ending her relationship with a man she had dated for 2 weeks. This came after 9 whole months of feigning excitement over the baby. Since neither of them could see anything wrong with their actions, Lisa's message just made matters worse. I blocked them both on social media, email, and the phone. It was around a week before they tried to get in touch with me again in any other way. The christening ceremony in the church where our family has been for centuries followed. Only a few of my hospital co-workers attended the small, private ceremony, including my aunt, with whom I have a great relationship, and my godmothers, Maria and Kelly. My mother somehow found out about the ceremony even though I'm positive none of these folks told her about it. Since she knows them from her years of volunteering at the church, I have a suspicion that one of the choir women may have told her. I'm going to report the person in question to the church administration because their gossip was very uncalled for and created a lot of drama. When my mother learned, she came to my condo the day after the christening. My mom wouldn't leave, even when I claimed I wasn't home, and I was attempting to put my daughter to sleep after a very demanding morning. She simply continued to ring the doorbell repeatedly. My daughter was becoming more and more agitated by the minute, so after 30 minutes of this, I opened the door to face her. She began scolding me right away for not being designated godmother and not being invited to the christening. We got into a furious disagreement when I told her that I had already made up my mind and that she couldn't change it. Her explanation was that she was merely attempting to support Lisa because, in her words, she was obviously going through something terrible. At least you had your doctor friends by your side, my mother said. However, Lisa's friends had specifically advised her not to date that guy, so she was unable to even discuss her problems with them. All she had to talk to was me, and she was struggling greatly. She moved in with me for that reason. She couldn't stand being by herself. Instead of being so cold and selfish, you ought to have shown more empathy as the older sister. What I was hearing was unbelievable. I told her that I didn't feel sorry for Lisa because she was solely to blame, and I felt even less sorry for my mother because she took the decision to not support me throughout delivery, not to mention to break her commitment to assist me in the last few weeks of my pregnancy. I could hear my daughter crying inside before the conflict got out of hand. I informed my mother that I couldn't waste time arguing with her about her bad decisions because I had to look after my child. Before I phoned security, I urged her to leave and shut the door in her face. Even when she eventually left, things didn't stop there. Since then, a number of my hospital co-workers have informed me that my mother has been disparaging me on social media, calling me evil and self-centered. I've seen the screenshots that people have sent me while I blocked her. I've done everything in my power to be a good mother to both of my daughters, but I guess some people just can't see that, she wrote in one of her posts. I can't be in one place at once. Being cut off from my granddaughter's life is my punishment for choosing to be there for the daughter who had no one else. My heart breaks for Lisa, who still hopes her sister will understand what she was going through, she said in another post. Although Lisa feels bad for causing me to miss the birth of my first grandchild, she is not the issue. I wish some people weren't so narcissistic and egotistical that they are unable to comprehend their sister's suffering. I was deeply affected by the most recent post. Karma always comes back around, she wrote. When you experience this firsthand as a mother, we'll see how you feel. A mother cannot be selfish, but a child can, so I'll forgive you for everything. A number of family members have contacted me, advising me to simply speak with Lisa and Mom and attempt to comprehend their perspective. My mother's posts have even been shared by certain members of my extended family, who have commented on them about how I'm tearing the family apart. I want an outside opinion even though I don't think I've done anything wrong. The stress of returning to work in the emergency room while taking care of a newborn isn't helping, and I'm aware that pregnancy and new motherhood can make you more emotional and irritable. However, it seems to me that my mother made her decision apparent when she put my sister's 2-week relationship drama ahead of the arrival of her grandson. Every day as physicians, we are taught to make tough choices, some of which require balancing conflicting priorities. That night, my mother made a decision as well. And she must now deal with the fallout. I've made the decision to put my daughter in a stable, drama-free home with folks who have shown they will truly be there for us when we need them. Update 1. Since my last post and the events that followed, I have given this situation a lot of thought from every perspective. Since some of you requested to see what was being stated, I would like to share the specific postings my mother has made since her social media campaign has escalated. I have tried my best to be a good mother to both of my daughters, but I guess some people just can't understand that I can't be everywhere at once, she wrote in her initial post. Therefore, I made the decision to support the daughter who was experiencing the greatest type of heartbreak and had no one else to lean on. Yes, that makes me the world's largest villain, but what does that make the daughter who excluded me from her life for such a trivial reason, and who refused to let me attend my granddaughter's baptism, any less of a monster? The epithet heartless would be appropriate. A few hours later, the second message said, I feel very sorry for Lisa. Lisa continues to hope that perhaps my other daughter will be understanding and attempt to comprehend what she was going through despite everything that has transpired. But I'm aware that it's useless. I know Lisa isn't the issue, but she doesn't want to be the reason I never get to be my first granddaughter's godmother. All I want is for her to see that and quit holding herself responsible for whatever has occurred. Additionally, I wish that some individuals would quit being so narcissistic and egotistical that they are unable to comprehend their sister's suffering. Yesterday's post, Karma Always Strikes Back, was the most current. A mother cannot be selfish, but a child may, so I will see you through this as a mother and forgive you for anything. She has shared numerous depressing statements about the challenges of motherhood in addition to these significant posts. She has gone to considerable lengths to describe all the drama in detail and paint me as the bad guy for everyone who contacts her directly to ask what's going on. I handle actual situations on a daily basis as an emergency physician. I find it not only upsetting but almost amusing when my mother and family attempt to portray my sister's 2-week relationship drama as some sort of serious problem that excused her from attending her grandchild's birth. I've received regular messages from a number of my relatives and uncles accusing me of being needlessly harsh with my mother and sister. One aunt even said that I should get therapy before I irreversibly harm my relationship with my family, since I may be stubborn because of postpartum depression. Additionally, I've gotten messages from members of my extended family that I haven't spoken to in years. They are all suddenly quite knowledgeable about the dynamics of my family. They constantly talking about how supportive my mother was during my pregnancy, conveniently ignoring the fact that her support primarily took the form of remarks on social media and sporadic visits when it suited her. I'm even more sure of my choice now that I've read all of their messages and seen my mother's posts. That night, my mother made her decision. Her daughter going into labor was not as important to her as my sister's romantic disappointment. The facts won't change, no matter how much she tries to change the story. I will refrain from participating in their social media drama. I won't try to explain myself or post my side of the story to relatives who have already made up their minds. My daughter and my career must be my top priorities. I have to take care of a newborn while working 12-hour shifts in the emergency room. I don't have time or energy for folks who are solely interested in making my life more stressful. Through it all, Maria and Kelly have been amazing. In addition to bringing food and checking in on us, they have been volunteering to monitor the baby while I take a break between shifts. I want people like this in my daughter's life, people who are there when it counts, not just when it's convenient. So, no, I don't believe I'm being harsh or callous. Regarding who I can and cannot rely on, I'm being practical. I made my choice and my mother made hers. Update 2. Since my last post, which was about a week ago, things have gotten much worse. My mother must have realized that her online drama campaign wasn't receiving the response she was hoping for because I haven't replied to any of her posts on social media. She made the decision to come see me again this morning, but this time she brought Lisa along. After a particularly long night shift in the emergency room, I was at home trying to get my kid to go asleep when they unexpectedly arrived. They said they wanted to apologize through the door, but I didn't want to get into another argument right then. I was aware that they would ultimately want to clear the air, which would entail repeating everything that had transpired, even if I answered the door and they apologized. I lacked the mental and physical stamina to do that. Through the door, I informed them that I had just placed my kid to sleep and was occupied with her. I clarified that if they truly wanted to apologize, they would have to wait until I was free to speak because I wasn't in the right frame of mind for a conversation at the moment. Knowing that if I was impolite, they may start yelling and wake my daughter, I made an effort to be as courteous as possible. However, they began yelling anyhow, so I shouldn't have bothered to keep things civil. They drove all the way here, and I had refused to even open the door to let them in, so they started scolding me for being rude. Just so you know, I hadn't requested that they do any of that. My mother began yelling at me, accusing me of destroying the family and using my daughter as a weapon against her. Lisa added that I was being theatrical and self-centered about the whole thing. Despite the fact that a baby was napping inside, they continued to get louder and louder. Something inside of me exploded as I heard my daughter begin to stir and fuss via the baby monitor. I opened the door and made it clear that I would call the police and request a restraining order if they didn't leave my property right away. They appeared surprised, most likely because they didn't think I would defend myself. My mother attempted to explain that I was exaggerating and that, as a grandma, she had rights. At least Lisa appeared to understand that I wasn't playing a bluff. She began dragging our mom away. Despite being pulled away, my mother continued to move. She continued to yell things like, "You'll regret this when you need my help," and curse at me while calling me derogatory names. And "you can't deny me my granddaughter indefinitely." As she pulled her away, Lisa murmured to herself that I was always like this, and that I was never able to deal with things like a normal person. I decided not to call the police this time because I didn't want to make things worse, but I won't think twice if they come by again. Their actions are now having an impact on my daughter, so it's no longer just about me. She was crying from all the chaos and completely awake when I returned inside. I've already told the security staff at my building about the incident and given them my sister's and mother's descriptions. In case I ever need to pursue legal action, I also kept a record of everything that happened, including the time and the words that were said. I'm not keeping them away from my daughter because I'm upset about what transpired during my labor, to be clear. They have repeatedly demonstrated that they don't respect boundaries and will always put their own feelings ahead of my daughter's welfare, which is why I'm keeping them away. The most recent instance of such was today. At least their actions made it quite evident that I am not at all like my mother. Even if she may not care about me, I will stop at nothing to shield my child from harmful conduct, even if it means severing familial relations. Update 3. My life has mercifully returned to a manageable pattern since my previous post, which was almost 2 months ago. Overall, things have been going well, despite my extreme workload at work and taking care of my baby. I haven't spoken to my mother or Lisa in weeks, and Maria and Kelly come to visit often to spend time with my kid and me. Lisa continued to try to get in touch for some time. She made several other social media accounts to message me after I blocked her initial one. In those letters, she described how, because Mom was so furious over everything, she had taken the side of our mother in the most recent argument. Lisa asserted that Mom was too arrogant to acknowledge her mistakes because of her advanced age. Lisa asked me to initiate contact in order to help Mom mend her bond with her granddaughter. Regardless of how many texts she sent, I never replied to any of them. She seemed to grow weary of making new accounts eventually and gave up completely. I sincerely appreciate that because my position has not changed. My mother must apologize before I will consider forgiving her. I won't consider allowing her to become a grandmother until after that. I'm perfectly happy with my life as it is right now. Taking care of my baby has become a lot simpler after I switched to more regular day shifts at the hospital. My coworkers have been tremendously supportive, particularly the parents among them. They're aware of the difficulties in juggling a rigorous medical job with being a single mom. Our lives have become even more reliant on Maria and Kelly. My daughter has effectively adopted Maria's 3-year-old boy as her big brother, and it's adorable to watch them interact at our weekend get-togethers. In order to administer all of my daughter's examinations and immunizations individually, Kelly has been organizing her pediatric clinic schedule. It is impossible to overstate the difference between my mother's actions and my friend's unwavering support. My mother and sister appear to think that the secret to establishing relationships is using theatrical gestures and emotional manipulation, even though Maria and Kelly have assimilated into our daily lives effortlessly. They still don't realize that trustworthy behavior, not ostentatious, theatrical displays of emotion when it suits them, is what builds trust. At last, some of my relatives have begun to distance themselves. Some have even expressed regret for becoming involved before fully understanding the situation. Initially supporting my mother, one aunt said that she had observed similar patterns of manipulative conduct from Mom in previous family contexts. In this calm setting, my daughter is flourishing. Kelly reassures me that she is in excellent health and that she is meeting all of her developmental goals on time. For both of us, the consistency of our current regimen has been excellent. There are moments when I question whether my mother is aware that she isn't getting to see her granddaughter grow up. She was unable to put her daughter's needs first during one of the most important times in life, not because I'm trying to be spiteful. Her priorities are clear from the fact that she put Lisa's small romantic setback ahead of attending her grandchild's birth. I recognize the irony that, despite my mother accusing me of using my daughter as a weapon, she attempted to mend our relationship, but only on her terms, by utilizing my pregnancy and her position as a grandmother. She desired all of the benefits of being a grandma without having to deal with the obligations or compromises that come with the position. I've gained a great deal of knowledge about motherhood over the last few months. It's now quite evident that being a mother involves being there for your child when they need you, not just when it's convenient or when you want something. My mother's behavior during my pregnancy and labor gave me a clear indication of the type of grandma she would be, someone who puts Lisa's drama and her own demands before of my daughter's welfare. I'm concentrating on creating the secure, caring atmosphere I want for my daughter to grow up in right now. Even if she doesn't have as many biological relatives, she does have something much more valuable: grown-ups who always prioritize her needs. The door isn't shut all the time. I would think about reintegrating my mother into our life if she ever truly admits her actions and extends a heartfelt apology. However, I refuse to wait for that to occur. Furthermore, I will not jeopardize my daughter's emotional health in the meanwhile. Protecting your child from harmful family dynamics might sometimes be the healthiest thing you can do for them, even if it means avoiding your own mother. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you. My wife divorced me, went on vacation with her affair partner, thinking she'd get my parents' trust fund, but instead, she got a lawsuit. Hello, I'm Aaron, a 30-meter person, and I'm just going to try to write everything down here. I've known my pals have been friends with me my entire life because they claim that I'm the trust fund baby. They always attempted to get close to me, assuming I would be sponsoring alcohol at parties and holding extravagant parties all over the world. But every time I proved to be nothing like that, they abandoned me. My parents do have a sizable trust fund for me, but I'm aware of how hard they have worked to earn it. I am aware that money wasn't created overnight and that my father's business may be destroyed by a single error. I therefore put a lot of effort into building on what my father began every single day. But I came so close to making that one error recently. I didn't date anyone while I was in college, except for Ashley, my wife, the love of my life, and 28F. I'm not the kind to casually date or hook up with women. My goal was to date in order to get married. But I drew all the wrong kinds of company when word got out about my parents' wealth. You know, having money makes you popular and makes others want to live off of you. I did occasionally sponsor alcohol and lend money to some of my friends, but nothing extravagant. Nothing that one would anticipate from a trust fund baby. I think it's okay to do things in moderation. In fact, it's crucial because you have to be a member of society. I therefore made an effort to be liked by everyone, although I hardly ever trusted anyone. I met Ashley at my graduation celebration. I struck up a conversation with her informally as she didn't seem to know me. We hit it off right away. After exchanging phone numbers, I took her to McDonald's for our first date. We had an incredible time. I fell in love and she didn't seem to mind that our first date wasn't particularly spectacular. My first love in life was Ashley. She wasn't dull and didn't seem to be making a concerted effort to win my approval. She was just being herself. She was also incredibly intelligent. I seemed to obtain an image that was beyond my budget while I was with her, and I felt normal. She didn't seem surprised at all when I took her to meet my parents after we had been dating for a month. She seems to agree that I was wealthy and impartial. That gave me hope that she wasn't at all put off by my money. She probably wasn't surprised because that was part of her strategy from the beginning, but I didn't realize that at the time. Winning me over was a well-planned tactic because she was well aware of who I was and that I was not seeing anyone. When she met with my parents, she exuded elegance. I fell deeply in love with her because she was so charming. The first female I ever took home was her. My parents were ecstatic about me. She never took any expensive presents from me during the year we dated. The fact that we weren't yet married was the only explanation for her refusal. After a year, I asked her to marry me. She was my parents' ultimate sweetheart. Since she wanted to work to increase our wealth, she told my parents that she only had one request and that they never asked her to quit her job. My mother gave her a hug and expressed their happiness that I had found a wife who was so encouraging. Ashley earned a respectable salary while working for an IT company. My parents threw a party for our second anniversary. They declared their intention to offer Ashley a present and suggested adding her name as a beneficiary in addition to mine. They introduced Rob, the trustee, and Ashley to everyone else. He worked as an accountant for the business that managed the investments and money's legalities. Rob had a daughter and was married. His spouse practiced law at the same firm. My wife's name was listed as one of the beneficiaries, and everything was handled. Ashley had a great relationship with my parents and always tried her hardest to make them happy. As part of her career, she also traveled and worked a lot. Later on, I discovered that whenever my parents hosted a party, she would travel with her affair partner. She constantly wanted to go and looked beautiful. Numerous times during these parties, I witnessed her conversing with Rob in a corner while blushing from the wine she was holding and laughing a bit too much. And even though I was naive and infatuated, I never once considered the possibility that she might be having an affair with Rob. However, these two had been having an affair behind my back the entire time. In retrospect, Ashley surprised me. She is a true professional actor. The idea of ever suspecting her felt sacrilegious because of how beautifully she treated each of us. She was merely waiting though. My parents died within 6 months of one another, about 7 years into our marriage. It was simply too hard to manage all the emotions and still keep the business operating, so I threw myself fully into my profession. Ashley began revealing her actual self for the first time in years at that point. She remained aloof after the funeral. I attempted to give her space since I believed she might be coping with her grief in her own manner. She didn't inquire about my well-being or mention anything about the death of my parents. I found that odd, but I also subconsciously chastised myself for not being able to express my feelings. It took me about 2 weeks before I made the decision to leave work early and speak with Ashley about it. On the way back, I purchased a bunch of pink roses. Since I had my own key, I opened the door and confronted Rob. I asked him if he had come to discuss the trust or something since I was perplexed. Ashley emerged with 2 luggage from behind him. That's when I realized Rob had 2 suitcases too. "Oh dang," Ashley remarked, glancing at me. "I meant to do this quietly. I was going to leave you a note to inform you that I'm moving out, but I suppose we'll have to do it in person now. I'm leaving you, all right?" "Yes, you heard correctly. And yes, after we get back from our trip to Italy, I'll be moving in with Rob. Your parents ensured that I would receive sufficient funds to cover it. We're divorcing then. Rob will now file for divorce as well. Don't look like a helpless puppy now." Are those flowers for me? Thank you. I'll take them. Goodbye. Before I could ask her to wait, they had already left. There was silence after I heard the motor revving up. My wife of 8 years abruptly left me. Is the phrase, the world crashing down in front of you, familiar to you? Well, that sums up my feelings the best. I didn't leave the house for 2 days. I kept the blinds closed. Cup noodles and chilled meals were my only sources of sustenance. I was afraid of the silence, so I never switched off the TV. I had no desire to take a bath. Someone rang the doorbell on the 3rd day. I assumed they would eventually go if I didn't answer the door, but that didn't happen. Whoever it was pressed the bell longer and harder each time it rang. The ringing continued for several minutes after that. Someone was now hammering on the door. I know you're in there, open up right now, a woman's voice said. I won't go until I have a little conversation with you. I assumed it was Ashley, but then I recalled that she and Rob were on vacation in Italy. I felt a new surge of melancholy at the concept. I dragged myself out of bed and began opening the door because the banging and knocking wouldn't stop. A woman with red hair wearing a 2-piece suit was waiting for me when I opened the door. It appeared as though she would eat my head off. Your wife fled with my husband, she remarked. It won't assist anyone to sit here and be a wimp. In 15 minutes, get up, take a bath, and enter the living room. We have a lot to discuss. As soon as I didn't answer, she opened the door, met my eyes and said, You stink. Okay, Mom, I said before I went to the restroom. I heard that, she yelled back. I laughed in spite of themselves. After my bath, I felt somewhat human again, and the living room looked immaculate when I got back. The kitchen was no exception. Rob's wife Sandra gave her introduction. She explained that she had been attempting to contact me at my workplace for the past 2 days but was unable to do so, so she ultimately made the decision to come to my house. She was serious. What she was telling me was unbelievable. Sandra claimed that, similar to me, she was unaware that Rob was unfaithful to her. Only 2 days ago, when he left the house and promised to send his assistant to get the rest of his belongings, did she find out. Her world was broken, just like mine was, but she didn't mope about it. She began to dig. She started by looking through Rob's laptop. There, he kept his work belongings, but he was hooked onto Facebook. She quickly combed through his conversations to discover who he was having an affair with. She swooped like a hawk once she was certain. She was very certain that Rob was withdrawing funds for his personal purposes after reviewing all of the documents pertaining to my trust fund. He was being helped by one of the beneficiaries, who was none other than Ashley, so it began little enough to go unnoticed, but ultimately he had grown confident and reckless. Although she wasn't lying, I kind of wanted she was. Sandra was prepared to destroy them because she had all the evidence. Sandra said, I have a little daughter. While I was still unsure. I'll get every last dime out of Rob, and I'll completely destroy Ashley. What you believe doesn't matter to me. I only wanted to let you know. If you do not wish to participate, you're under no obligation to do so. She exuded confidence and determination, and I knew from a way that I could trust her. I was on board then. We exchanged handshakes. We were working on a scheme that would cost my ex-wife a lot of money while she was on vacation in Italy. Rob and Ashley had returned from their 10-day vacation in Italy. Sandra and I wanted to see how they would react when the penny dropped, so we waited for their call. I had been at work on a Monday when Ashley called. She went on a tirade as soon as I answered. What on earth is going on? What does Rob mean when he says we're having problems? Where's my money too? You mean the money from my parents that Rob used to buy you presents and most likely the apartment you moved into, I said. I hope my lawyer got back to you. It's Rob's wife Sandra, who also happens to be employed at the company. Before she could utter another thing, I hung up and told her I had to leave. That day Ashley was waiting outside when I left work. She blocked my path as I proceeded toward my car, pretending not to notice her. I had known her for a long time, but I had never seen her so upset by anything. She requested me to explain things to her since she seemed to be having trouble understanding Rob's nervous account of what happened and wanted to hear it from me in simple terms. I informed her that I had learned about the divorce petition from her attorney. The only difference was that she would not receive a single dime. The expression on her face, oh boy. She never would have imagined that this would be taking place. I saw the panic rising within her. After experiencing a moment of cruel pleasure, I felt a great deal of guilt for placing her in this predicament. It's hard to see someone you care about suffer, and I still loved her. I had to leave as soon as possible to avoid being manipulated by her. I brushed her aside and headed for my car. From behind me I heard her yelling. She was requesting that I stop. How could you do this to me? was the final thing I heard before getting into the car. I wanted to lash out and tell her that I could ask her the same stupid question because I felt like I was being stabbed. Instead though, I got into my car and left. In my rear-view mirror, I could see her, completely confused, taking care of the automobile. Rob, meantime, had received notification that he would be leaving the organization. He was damaging the company's reputation, and it seems that word had gotten out. Since many customers had contacted to request contract termination, firing Rob was the greatest damage control measure the company could take. Sandra arranged for the best counsel because she had several friends who were lawyers. She was confident that she would win the lawsuit and be granted custody. As I drove home, Sandra was providing me with all of these information. I felt a lot lighter. I wrote this up after returning home. I wanted to let out my frustration after my encounter with Ashley. Is Ashley being treated too harshly, in your opinion? Update 1. Hello to everybody. I have an update now. A week has passed. I appreciate you helping me and getting me back up when I was feeling quite lost. I showed him this Reddit article during our first therapy appointment. It's a good coping mechanism, he said. According to him, it's normal to mourn the person you lost, in this case, Ashley, so it makes sense that I would feel extremely overwhelmed once I revealed the truth. I'll try to give you all a summary of what transpired this week. Ashley gave me another call. Her voice was softer this time. She spoke in a muffled voice, as if she had been sobbing. I was asked if I had eaten dinner. Do you want me to come over and cook it for you? She said after I declined. I was surprised. She stated she would be at my house in 30 minutes, so I assumed she interpreted my silence as a yes. No, you won't, I responded, finally finding my voice. Are you serious? You want to come here, make me supper and set up a playhouse after what you did? No, darling, she said. We can talk, even though I know things haven't been well. At the time, I was going crazy. At this moment, I believe I yelled, bad? Do you think what you did was bad? Simply awful? It was evil. It was self-centered and cruel. You're going to hell with it. I would never again want to see your face. What the devil is wrong with you? I felt like throwing up at the next thing she uttered. I should stop overreacting, she said. For me, I believe it marked a turning point. At this time, I saw her true self, a woman who didn't regret her acts at all and would do it all over again in a heartbeat, despite the remorse I had been feeling for hurting her. The call was a trap, an attempt to control me. She was unaware of my realization and continued to complain about how I was portraying her in the lawsuit as a gold digger, even though she was actually making money and had a job. I wanted to let her know that I had paid off all of her student loans, so if she was now living nicely, it was thanks to my family and me. She claimed that the only reason she wanted to visit was because she believed we should have a conversation and reconcile, and that I should drop my case since it was useless. It was impossible for me to refrain from asking, what about Rob? She claimed that Rob was simply different and that she was having an affair with him because he made her boring existence interesting. She then began accusing me of never being there for her and of being away on business. She claimed that she had a passionate romance with Rob, whereas I lacked it greatly. I was suing her rather than offering her an apology. By this time, I was certain she was attempting to bleed my ear. She could have discussed it with me or we could have attended marriage counseling, I informed her, if she had been experiencing so many issues. The answer was never cheating. She started to insist on coming over and change the subject. After hanging up, I dialed Sandra. I explained what had transpired to her. Sandra requested that I call her back and invite her over. I will also come over, she responded. She requested me to comply in order to find out her true intentions. I ended my conversation with Sandra and dialed Ashley instead. When she picked up, she sounded so arrogant. She claimed she will be there in 30 minutes and that she knew I would come around. Sandra arrived before Ashley did. There was not enough time for her to explain her plan, and I was unaware of it. She wanted me to make Ashley sit in the dining room after she went inside. Sandra stated that she would appear in this play in a special capacity. About 40 minutes later, Ashley arrived, and it was clear that she had tried to appear presentable. She did look nice. She entered, gave me a kiss and started to go to the bedroom where Sandra was. I halted her and requested that she take a seat in the dining room. But why, sweetheart? She pouted as she turned to face me. Was it easy for me to forfeit my rights? Was your affection so feeble? Baby, will you not stand up for us? It was then that Sandra emerged from the bedroom. Ashley muttered something along the lines of, what the hell, as she appeared too astonished to talk. Finally, we meet the woman who is dating my useless husband Rob the cheater, Sandra stated with a smirk to Ashley. You did indeed forfeit your right to the bedroom, I see. Ashley turned to face me and said, "How could you so simply replace me? After stealing all of my joy, you're having an affair with Rob's wife. We owe a lot of money, and now we won't even receive the money from the trust fund. Rob is currently unemployed, and it's unclear who released the information. I could also lose my job. You're incredibly self-centered." "What do you mean we have debts?" Sandra interrupted. "Is it comparable to a joint loan? Are you withdrawing the money and assisting Rob and Miss BL or what?" Ashley swung her around. "Then absolutely, I was. Rob has had my support from the beginning. Do you believe he could have organized such a thing himself? Of course I aided him. Not like you, wicked witch. You have treated him in a condescending manner. He chose me over you for that reason. Leave this place. When your husband is unemployed, how are you able to be here? Why in the world don't you support him and make a statement in his favor?" After giving me a charming smile, Sandra informed me that she believed I should send Ashley home. The task was completed. After receiving the signal, I held the door open for Ashley. Ashley hurled a barrage of insults at us as she walked out. What just happened?" I asked Sandra as she was leaving. Sandra winked at me after pressing stop on a tape. "We got a confession, Aaron," she exclaimed with excitement, her eyes gleaming. "We'll destroy them." She heard me say, "I'm not letting both of them escape. That's Sandra for you, my friends. She is cruel and cunning. I would be afraid of her if I were Rob and Ashley. She simply performs her job too well." Sandra admitted before leaving that she was the one who had clearly leaked the Rob news. I informed her that I was picking up on her intelligence and that I had at least deduced that she was involved. "I'll keep you guys informed." At last, the game is starting. Update 2. I'm back with an update, which I think is a bit early, but I couldn't wait to share it with you all. Sandra is an incredibly vicious murderer. She explained everything in detail and submitted the recording to Ashley's employer. In the note, she stated that someone who would go to such efforts to deceive her loved ones wasn't a trustworthy employee and would likely attempt to steal money from them if she saw a chance. Sandra also had a long-standing friendship with one of Ashley's business colleagues. Sandra's buddy quickly withdrew from a transaction she was about to support, claiming that she had doubts about the reliability of several team members. The agreement was therefore off the table. When Ashley's supervisor heard the news, he was completely distraught. To salvage the deal, they acted quickly and dismissed the offending individual. That's all. My ex-wife was abruptly let go from the corporation. Both of them are currently unemployed and in debt. Sandra informed me that she had been receiving constant calls from Rob. He began messaging her when she didn't answer. She disabled his number and urged him to stop bothering her. "I'm having a great time right now. According to my therapist, who I've been seeing, Ashley ought to serve as a case study on narcissism." That was kind of amusing, lol. After a long time, I burst out laughing. In any case, I'll update you all. Oh, did I mention that Rob had been arrested? Ashley apparently had to take money out of her savings account to cover his bail. Serve them well, lol. For now, goodbye. Update 3. Sandra gave me a call this morning. She was enraged. Rob apparently rang her doorbell intoxicatedly early in the morning and continued to abuse her. The entire incident was captured on her security camera. He tried breaking in when Sandra begged him to leave. Only after Sandra threatened to call the police did he go. The worst part of the entire situation was that Sandra and Rob's daughter, Emily, woke up as a result of all the noise. She witnessed the events and is now traumatized. Children typically suffer after divorce, but witnessing your father go drunk on your doorstep, yelling at your mother, and attempting to break into the house is an entirely different matter. Since then, Emily has refused to leave her room. Sandra needed to go to the police station to file a restraining order, so she asked if I could come over. At such short notice, she was unable to hire a babysitter. I assured her I didn't mind and asked them to call me at work if they needed anything. Sandra went out the door as soon as I arrived. Since Emily hadn't even had breakfast, she advised me to offer her some food if she came out. I went to knock on Emily's room as soon as Sandra left. I got a pin and shattered the lock when no one answered. I have no idea why, but I was feeling suspicious. I was contemplating the worst-case situations during the stillness. I was unable to remain motionless while the youngster was in pain. There was no one in the room when I rushed in, and I was breathing heavily. Then I noticed a slight movement. Emily was concealed beneath the bed. With the exception of her hair, the 3 or 4-year-old daughter looked exactly like her mother and was staring at me with fear in her eyes. She stammered in terror and managed to ask me if Rob had sent me and if I was her dad's buddy. I got down on my knees and said hello. I explained to her that I was actually her mom's friend rather than her father. At that, she appeared to calm down a little. She then began to stare out the window nervously and inquired as to whether her father had left. Since her mother was like a tigress and would do everything in her power to protect her cub, I answered that he was. At that point, she broke down in tears and confided in me about her fear that Rob would break in and harm her mother. I promised her I would never allow that to occur. In addition to losing a parent, this innocent child had witnessed what a terrible monster her father was, and I felt terrible for her. I persuaded her to play her favorite Disney film and come out. I served her some lasagna that I had warmed up. Sandra tells me that Emily was sleeping well on my chest and drooling into her favorite pillow when she returned. Emily clung to my legs and wouldn't let me go that evening when I was ready to go. She sobbed repeatedly before finally admitting that she was afraid Rob would reappear and leave her mother alone. When Sandra rolled her eyes at me, I stopped joking that her mother didn't need to be protected. I stayed the night because I knew it would be very hard to explain a restraining order to a youngster. Emily and I both slept soundly. Sandra served us delicious pancakes the following morning, and I left right away for work. That night, Emily made me swear that I would return to sleep at their place. Well, I suppose that's my life at the moment. Sandra's place is where I have to stay at night. Sandra has yet to find a good child psychologist, despite her best efforts. I'll give you all an update following the initial hearing. Goodbye. Update 4. Well, phew, I guess I haven't given you guys any updates in a while. The initial hearing has concluded. This is what a lay person like me has discovered. Rob and Ashley are completely cooked. Yes, brother, I do mean it. They're barbecue cooked. We have so much damning evidence against them that the matter is really closed. However, given the nature of courts, it is likely to take a long time. Sandra thinks it won't take more than 6 months. She also thinks that they will both be going to jail. Rob and Ashley will definitely not receive any compensation for the divorce. Rob is also required to pay child support. Rob and Ashley were unsuccessful in their employment search. I've learned that Rob works as a janitor at a local club. We witnessed Rob being assaulted by some loan sharks outside the court. For that man, things are looking bleak. He's done. He rushed to Sandra when he saw her outside the court and collapsed at her feet. We now know better, yet he persisted in pleading with her to take him back. According to Sandra's attorney, Rob won't even be granted visitation rights because the case is so strongly in Sandra's favor. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you. My wife poisoned my family against me and took my daughter away, but years later, the truth finally came out. This is a story I never imagined I'd tell publicly, but after all that has happened, I need to get it off my chest. The previous several weeks have been nothing short of a roller coaster. Maybe someone out there can help me figure out if I'm really the terrible guy in all of this. I, 48 million, have experienced a tornado of emotions and experiences over the last decade, and it has all come to a climax in unexpected ways. It all began many years ago, when I married Laura, the mother of my daughter Emily. Laura and I were high school sweethearts, and at first, our bond appeared impenetrable. We were young, full of dreams, and eager to face the world together. But life has a way of tearing apart even the strongest relationships, and it wasn't long before the flaws in our relationship began to appear. Laura came from a wealthy family, accustomed to a life of luxury, whilst I grew up in a more modest home. Despite our disagreements, I loved her profoundly and did my best to provide for her in the way she was accustomed to. But no matter how hard I tried, it wasn't enough. The stress of attempting to meet Laura's expectations weighed heavily on me, and our marriage began to falter. Our relationship deteriorated, and we argued more frequently. I observed Laura appeared detached, as if her mind was elsewhere. I attempted to reach out to figure out what was wrong, but she continually dismissed me, stating that everything was okay. Only later, during the divorce proceedings, did I uncover the tragic reality. Laura had been unfaithful to me several times during our marriage. The revelation struck me like a ton of bricks. All those evenings I worked late to support our family, all the sacrifices I made to keep our marriage afloat, and she had been betraying me the entire time. Despite the grief and betrayal, my first priority was Emily, our daughter. She was just 11 years old at the time, and I wanted to do everything I could to be there for her. But that hope was dashed during the divorce settlement. Laura was determined to portray me as the villain in our story. She accused me of being emotionally distant and inattentive, and even hinted at possible abuse, all of which were false. But Laura was convincing, and she was able to turn my entire family against me, including my parents and siblings. They all believed her narrative and assumed that I had done something dreadful to push her to adultery. It seemed like I was stranded on an island, with no one willing to listen to me. The courtroom battle was ugly, and despite my best efforts, the judge sided with Laura. She was given full custody of Emily, while I was granted limited visitation rights. Laura destroyed even those few opportunities to visit my baby. She frequently forgot about scheduled visits, claiming Emily was unwell or had other commitments. I would volunteer to drive Emily to school or assist her with assignments, but Laura refused to let me play any significant role in her life. My family, who had always been close to Emily, supported Laura and helped her keep my daughter away from me. They were determined to remove me from Emily's life, and I was powerless to stop them. The years that followed were among the most agonizing of my life. It began subtly at first. Emily would be hesitant to visit me, preferring to stay with her mother. Even though it stung, I attempted to understand. After all, children frequently prefer one parent over the other, correct? However, it soon became evident that something more sinister was at work. Emily would come to our appointments with a laundry list of complaints, things I allegedly did or said that depicted me as the evil guy. I was perplexed since none of it was accurate. When I tried to talk to Laura about it, she dismissed my concerns or twisted the conversation to make it appear as if I was crazy or exaggerating. I tried for years to establish a relationship with Emily, but it got increasingly impossible. Phone calls remained unanswered, letters were returned unopened, and my attempts to visit her were met with animosity from Laura and my family. They all seemed intent on erasing me from Emily's life. The worst thing happened when Emily was around 13. She said bluntly that she didn't want to see me anymore. She spoke it with coldness, as if I meant nothing to her. I was devastated. I knew Laura had been telling Emily lies, but I didn't have the heart to drag her through a messy court battle. After all, she wanted to stay with her mother, and separating her from her mother would only exacerbate the situation. I didn't want to be the source of further trouble in her life, so I reluctantly decided to pull back. It was one of the most difficult decisions I'd ever made. I hoped that one day she'd grasp the truth and return to me, but that didn't happen for a long time. Years later, I gradually but steadily moved past that horrific moment in my life. I met Megan, and there was an instant connection between us. Because of my previous experiences, we took our time getting to know each other before getting married. Megan had 2 children of her own, so the majority of my time was spent with them, and we established a life together. While I adored my new family, there was always a part of me that wondered about Emily. How was she doing? What had she become? I contacted Laura several times over the years to inquire about Emily, but she never replied. I tried to convince myself that Emily was better off without me, but I couldn't get rid of the sense that I had abandoned her. Then, unexpectedly, Emily contacted me. She was 20 years old now, and her message was brief and straightforward. She wanted to meet and chat. She stated she needed to know more about our family, including why I wasn't there for her. My heart skipped a beat as I read her message. The prospect of seeing her after all this time made me nervous, but I was not going to pass up the opportunity to see my kid. I was scared but excited. Perhaps this was the moment I had been waiting for all these years. We planned to meet in a quiet cafe. I was nervous as I waited for her to arrive. When she eventually walked in, I barely recognized her. She had matured into a beautiful young woman, but the wrath and sadness in her eyes were undeniable. She had clearly been carrying a lot of anguish for quite some time. We sat across from each other, and the tension was evident. Emily didn't spend time getting to the subject. She needed answers. Answers I knew would be difficult to hear. I took a big breath and started telling her the truth. I did not hold back. I told her everything. How her mother and family had deliberately poisoned her against me, how they had twisted every scenario to make me look terrible, and how I had worked so hard to be a part of her life despite everything. I told her about Laura's infidelity and the lies she told during the divorce. I spent the next 3 hours laying out the facts of what had happened. I had brought up previous court records, text messages, and emails that corroborated my story. I wanted Emily to know that I understood what she had been taught about me over the years, and that I wasn't the monster she had been led to believe. Emily sat startled as I explained what had transpired. She grew up believing that I was the one who had abandoned her, that I didn't care enough to be a part of her life. She found it overwhelming to learn the truth. I could see she was absorbing everything, so I didn't press her to react. I knew that was a lot for her to take in. When she finally spoke, her voice trembled. She questioned me why I never fought back, why I didn't do more to stay in her life. That question crushed me. I had to explain that I did not want to place her in the center of a court dispute and that I believed standing back was the best way to protect her. I wanted her to have a good upbringing, even if it meant she despised me for a while. But the truth was that I regretted not battling harder. I regretted allowing Laura and her family to control the story. Emily appeared to be gaining a better understanding of what had happened. She was outraged, partly at me, but largely at her mother. She couldn't believe Laura had gone to such efforts to make herself look like the better parent. Emily realized she had to take action. She stated that she wanted to confront her mother and lay everything out for everyone. I was astonished, but also proud of her for advocating for herself. Emily wasn't the young kid I knew a decade ago. She was a strong lady capable of self-defense. At the same time, I was concerned about the impact this would have on her. I breathed a sigh of relief when she said she wasn't sure how to go with our connection because she'd grown accustomed to having an absent father, but she'd love to meet and talk more. Laura bombarded me with angry phone calls and text messages 2 days later. Emily apparently challenged her with the information I shared. Laura was outraged, accusing me of turning Emily against her and ruining their friendship. I didn't expect Emily's next action. She called me yesterday to say she's going to take Laura to court for parental alienation. She intends to sue for the emotional harm caused by years of lies and manipulation. Laura still calls me constantly now. She is between demanding that I talk Emily out of the lawsuit and threatening. My family is also getting in touch, suddenly wanting to straighten things out and reconnect. I'm at a loss. One could say that Emily's at last knowing the truth relieves some guilt. Conversely, I never meant for things to get this far. Along with Emily, I also have Megan and her children to look for at this point in my life. I'm not sure whether I could manage the same mental strain once more. While Laura and my family should pay for their acts, I don't want to bring further suffering or trouble. I have been essentially torn. Emily deserves praise for searching the truth and for trying to speak out against the mistreatment she has suffered. But I also worry for her. The legal system is harsh, particularly in cases involving families, and I wanted her to suffer less than she already had. From a distance, I attempted to assist her so she could make her own decisions and let her know I was always available for her should she need me. The emotional strain Laura and my family are causing is not even something I can articulate. All of this makes me wonder if, despite this complex scenario, I did the right thing by telling my daughter the truth about her mother and our past. Your advice and views would be much valued. Update 1. Hey everyone, things have turned bad. Which was rather natural. Any confrontation with Laura would not be simple since she shows no respect for anyone around her. I only knew that would also include our daughter. Emily came to our house after her argument with her mother. Her eyes were red from crying. She unleashed this time without restraint. She laid everything out, every agonizing aspect of her life for the past 8 years. Laura might have gained custody, but it was abundantly evident that she had no concept what it meant to be a mother, let alone look after a child. Emily related how Laura wasn't even home half of the time. She would be away, occasionally for days on end, leaving Emily to care for herself. Laura was intoxicated and erratic half of the time, when she was home. Emily talked of evenings when Laura would come home in a fury, throwing things, screaming, and occasionally even blaming Emily for her own mistakes and discontent. As she related these events, the loneliness, the anxiety she must have experienced, my heart broke. Still to come though, was the worst. Emily related to us 2 occurrences that still tormented her. She was 13 years old at first. Laura had departed without food or money, alone for the weekend. Emily burned her hand quite severely while trying to prepare something for herself. She was in great agony, but when she tried phoning Laura, she did not answer. Just a child, Emily had to go to the closest hospital with her hand covered in a towel. Alone, terrified, in pain, she waited hours in the ER before a nurse at last spotted her and attended to her. Emily showed me the scar on her palm, a continual reminder of her mother's negligence. Still worse was the second episode. Laura had been on a drinking frenzy for weeks. She was 15. Emily made every effort to avoid her mother, until one evening Laura became aggressive. In a flash of wrath, she flung a glass at Emily that broke against her leg severely. Emily was in shock and bleeding. Instead of tending to her, Laura yelled at her to tidy the mess. Terrified, Emily covered her leg in an old shirt and headed once more toward the hospital. She wound up needing sutures there. I had a range of emotions as Emily related these tales, sorrow for all the suffering Emily had gone through, and fury at Laura for sending our daughter through this dream. It was not something I had felt in years. She was young and not deserving of any of this. She did not deserve to be left terrified, injured and alone. The one person meant to be defending her ought not to treat her like a burden. This was unmistakable physical and psychological assault. It seemed ironic that Laura's daily routines included the very things she had accused me of dragging Emily away from. Laura should have simply let me look after Emily to prevent all of this. Emily may have had a normal, contented life if she hadn't been so enthralled with her own selfishness and spite. The entire evening Megan and I listened to Emily. We checked to see she felt at ease and understood she was safe now. Megan specifically consoled Emily by holding her hand and telling her none of this was her fault. Having someone console Emily, tell her she was loved and that she mattered, seemed so important to her. Then Emily apologized to me in a moment that was both sad and contradictory. She had nothing to repent of, hence she didn't need to? But she did. She admitted she pushed me away, she was sorry for believing all the lies her mother had taught her, and she should have seen the reality sooner. Her voice faltered as she informed me she had missed me so much over these years and had frequently wondered what life would have been like if she had lived with me instead. I told her how much I had missed her too, how I had never stopped thinking about her, how I had never stopped loving her, and that she did not need to apologize for anything as Laura's games merely served as a victim stage. That was a mixed feeling. Hearing her apologies hurt, but it also meant that we were at last re-establishing our relationship following all these years apart. I also came to see that I was done running from family strife and playing it safe. Though it meant facing legal conflict with my ex-wife, my daughter's well-being was at risk and I was determined to receive the apology and reparations she deserved. After a restless night of consoling and chatting, Emily and I hatched a strategy early the next morning. We were going to face my family about everything. Every lie, every act of neglect, everything Emily had gone through. I was done with them acting as though they were the ideal family while Laura had helped Emily to ruin her early years. The medical records, text messages, and even some old Laura voicemails Emily had preserved provided the evidence we needed. It was time to tell them just exactly what their complicity had cost. It was time to reveal the truth. Emily seemed anxious, but I could also detect a resolution in her eyes not previously seen. I was going to be right there beside her. She was ready to meet them and defend herself. At last, we would be getting the justice we both deserved, and I knew that whatever happened would be shared by us. Whatever transpires, you folks will be the first to know. It means a lot to have you understand my circumstances and provide constructive remarks. This is absolutely not the end, hence I will come returning with updates. Update 2. Hi everybody, hope everyone is doing fantastic? Think back to the family confrontation Emily and I had scheduled. Well, it happened and it was most certainly memorable. I agreed to pay a surprise visit together with my daughter. I saw the amazement on their faces as soon as we entered the door. They seemed unable to really handle seeing us together, united after all these years. They had never imagined that the years of isolation, manipulation, and deceit could be quickly reversed. Here we were nevertheless, poised side by side ready to face them. The first shock passed swiftly, and they hurried to present their customary worried front. The first person to talk was my mother, whose voice was tinged with phony anxiety as she asked Emily whether I had offended her or harmed her. The implication stung, not because I cared what others thought of Laura, but rather because it demonstrated how firmly they had embraced her story. Though it was a horrible idea, one they appeared to hold without doubt was that I would hurt my own daughter. Perhaps because it would help them to defend their own behavior, they were fast to accept the worst of me. But Emily was no more the terrified, bewildered child Laura knew, and I was not Laura. Emily stepped forward before I could answer. Her voice was firm, full of a quiet strength that made me proud. She urged them to abandon the act, to stop acting as though they cared when throughout the years they had done nothing to support her. Her statements were neither wavering or hesitant. She called them out for their indifference, for standing by while Laura ignored and mistreated her, and for helping to bring about the ruin of her early years. I observed as my siblings and parents struggled to hide their uneasiness. Their looks changed from pretended concern to something more like irritation. They disliked being challenged, particularly not by Emily, who they still considered as a child, someone who ought to be appreciative of whatever sloppiness of attention they had given her. But Emily was no child anymore, and she showed no interest in their empty apologies or explanations. Some of you have inquired how Laura simply set my own family against me. Our relationship has always been complex, underlying animosity and years of unresolved problems entangling it. My siblings and I had never been close. There was always a sense of one-upmanship, of competitiveness, that corroded any possibility of a real bond. Rather than encouraging harmony, my parents had sided with whichever child would have the greatest benefit for them at the time. Laura came to them intending to divorce me, and they saw it as a chance to vent their residual animosity at me. They had not given Emily or me any thought about how it would affect us. Their interests were more in seeing me pushed down a peg than in clearing past records. Emily gave out everything that had happened. How Laura had deserted her, how she had experienced trauma and injuries while they turned a blind eye, and I could see the anxiety rising on their faces. Particularly not by someone they had undervalued for so long, they were not used to being questioned in this manner. It was not only the words that stung, it was Emily's holding of them responsible, refusing to let their typical platitudes absolve them. Of course, we withheld some of what we had. Showing all of our cards at once was not necessary. We had text messages, hospital records, and other data readily able to undermine their well-crafted story. For now, though, we kept most of it under wraps, simply showing enough to make it abundantly evident we were serious. This was a warning, a proclamation that we were done following their guidelines and that things were going to get far more serious, not only some emotional outburst. We fled the house not waiting for any reply. Nothing they could say would make any difference, nothing that would undo the years of suffering and neglect they had let to occur. Emily said one last farewell as we turned away. She advised them to forward it to Laura, therefore alerting her that we were arriving with a somewhat heavy case and she should be ready for it. Although the silence that followed us as we departed was oppressive, it was a silence loaded with unspoken words, the weight of what was to come. Emily and I had marked our line on the sand. There was no turning back. The family has always prospered on separation, on keeping us apart and at conflict with one another. But now, Emily and me standing together, they were the ones who would have to deal with the fallout. I want you to know that I am always reading over each and every comment. All of you have given me some of the best advice. Your help is quite valuable. Update 3. Hello, I want to thank everyone who has supported and advised me based on this narrative. Though I believe we are at last seeing a way forward, the previous few days have been some of the most difficult of my life. So strap up for a long one. I got in touch with one of our lawyers right away following the event at my family's house. Not just to me but also to Emily. I was not ready to let Laura get away with all she had done. Emily startled me nevertheless when I mentioned considering legal action. She wanted no more legalities moving ahead. Far from contrary, it was not that she lacked empathy or that she was forgiving her mother. Emily had different responsibilities now and had lately gone through a lot. She had great ideas for her future and her academic life was vibrant. She could not afford to pause to sue her mother and handle a court dispute. As her dad, I was really proud of her. She was still a brilliant, tenacious young woman with enormous professional possibilities ahead of her after all she had gone through. I did, however, also find myself torn. Part of me wanted Laura to suffer for her deeds, to pay for the suffering she had brought about. One thing I did wrong was ruin my life. Nevertheless, I found unforgivable damage done to Emily, that of robbing her of a normal, happy childhood. I did, however, honor Emily's desires. Unlike her mother's, her view counted here, and it was something I would constantly keep in mind while deciding what to do. Another thing occurred when we were negotiating all of this. 2 days later, Laura's neighbor walked up to our door bearing an envelope. The neighbor said Laura had asked her to bring the mail to us as she was temporarily leaving town. Though I had no idea what to expect, I accepted the envelope and thanked the neighbor. Within the envelope Laura had a note, long and full of apologies and explanations. It sought to defend her behavior. She talked about losing her job, how she grew quite alone when I left, and how events descended from there. She finally landed another job, but it paid little, and she descended into more misery. Drinking became her coping mechanism. She said she never intended to hurt Emily, that she was simply so lost and overwhelmed by her own suffering. Laura continued to go into great detail about more of her challenges, seeking to depict a lady driven to the brink by events beyond her reach. But reading made me focus only on how hollow everything sounded. Laura was obviously trying to justify her actions and project an impression of victimization from her own experiences. But no degree of difficulty could excuse her treatment of Emily. She begged us not to go to legal war at the end of the letter. As a show of kindness, she pledged to avoid Emily. She also offered to pay whatever we felt was appropriate as reparations for the damage she had done. Emily's eyes showed grief as soon as I turned over the letter to her. She had not sought this apology, and it most definitely was not the resolution she was due. What kind of mother leaves her child like this and subsequently believes that money could possibly offset all the years of suffering and neglect? For Emily, it was a terrible insight. I knew she needed time to get through it. Emily needed space as she would reach out to Megan or me when she was ready. For Emily, someone she could confide in without judgment, my wife Megan had become fast a comfort. Soon Emily became like family to all of us, developing a close relationship with Megan's kids. Although I wanted to assist, I knew Emily would gain more from Megan's support and viewpoint to help her to organize everything. Eventually Emily came to me with her choice. She refused to go after a legal lawsuit. She wanted not to drag things out anymore or become mired in a nasty court struggle. Freed from the shadows of the past, she wanted to start anew and concentrate on her and her future. Emily was ready to go on, and I knew this was the right decision even if I wanted justice for her. She had lived under the weight of her mother's errors for sufficient time. She was ready to live her life on her terms. Emily's choice sent us into a fresh chapter. She began concentrating more on her academics, directing her efforts toward her objectives and dreams. As Megan negotiated this new stage of her life, Megan and I kept helping her in all possible respects, providing direction and encouragement. Regarding myself, this seems like a dream. Things cannot have concluded on a better note. I have 3 children and an incredible wife at my side. Though the trip had been protracted and agonizing, at last we had returned to one another. More than all, that was the real success in all of this. Once more, I appreciate all of your support. Though it's been an incredible journey, I believe we are at last headed toward recovery. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.